Supposed to charge. We're lobbying to, or cable was. It was none of us. It was only cable.
Who's killed?
Right under the bus.
Right under the bus.
Just want to table everything. Caleb,
No,
for?
I'm in violent agreement with Caleb to stop this hybrid. Have an input.
I think he told me they'd not done. We're like the last group. That
Can this be our last meeting tonight?
Just a village district.
Motion to that effect?
It's farming, like, it's not.
How'd I do, Caleb?
You know what? You drove it
Going on
home.
a gas
Thank
station.
you.
Oh, yeah, it's dangerous now.
Oh, geez.
I haven't been able to use
What's
this.
saying the matter die?
See the Yankee game the other day?
Yeah. The guy sounds, yeah, it's like, what do you think?
I know, I wish the youngest.
Dave, you ready?
Oh dear. Oh my-
Today?
Sure.
Wait for Salco.
Yeah.
It was like a
Yeah.
papers or something, or was it the rain?
Apologize, I'm right-handed.
Oh,
though,
that's the
so
worst.
Sure.
Oh,
Me too.
Maybe your ear gets a little.
got 3 volts of rain. Now you got that.
Hey, folks. Ready over here? Ready?
There you go.
All right, let's call the meeting of the Southington Planning and Zoning Commission to order for July 20th, 2021. Dave, can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Agoric,
Commissioner Gwarick here.
Commissioner Volpe,
Commissioner Volpe here.
Commissioner Wulowski,
Wowski here.
Commissioner Locks,
Commissioner Locks here.
Alternate Commissioner Albanese, Alternate Commissioner Coles,
Bowles is here.
Alternate Commissioner Coviello, Alternate Commissioner Sable, Commissioner Santago,
Santago's here.
Vice Chair Salka,
Commissioner Salka here.
and Chair Hammersley.
Hammersley's here. I did hear from Joe Coviello. He's not going to be attending this evening, but we do have a quorum. So if we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Stands. One nation. Stands for all.
Just remain standing for a moment of silent reflection, please. Thank you. Looking for a motion to approve our minutes from our meeting held on June 15th, 2021.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Motion by Commissioner Salka. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Locks. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, motion passes. Item number 7 on the agenda, item A, Wesley Coat, special permit application to construct a garage which is in excess of 3 spaces, property located at 131 AKA 137 Mount Vernon Road in our 2025 zone, special permit number 651. Do we have the applicant here?
Mr. Chairman, a table has been requested until we figure out the extent of the wetlands on the property.
Okay. Thanks. Before I move into the business meeting, I just want to make an announcement for everybody in the audience. We do have an item on our agenda that is going to talk about a possible regulation with regards to the sale of recreational cannabis in the town of Southington. Tonight, we will not be taking public input on that process. This is just a discussion amongst commission members to give staff guidance on whether we should or shouldn't be drafting a proposed regulation. Once that regulation comes back at some point in the future, probably in August, we will be taking, as we usually do with regulations such as that, we will be providing an opportunity for the public to provide input to us. So I just don't, if anyone's here who is waiting for that, I don't want anyone to sit there until we're done with everything because it is the last number on our agenda. And out of respect of your time, I want to make sure that if you wanted to leave and not be bored by listening about excess garages or, industrial buildings or that type of stuff, that, you don't really have to stick around, but it's your prerogative, of course. So, okay, so we'll move to item 8 under business meeting. Item 8A, we have a table for that. Dave, we don't need a motion on that.
You can do a voice vote.
Can we get a motion to table item 8A, please?
Mr. Chairman, make a motion, we approve a table for item 8A on the agenda.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We'll ask you with a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Item 8B, I understand that we have a request to table this as well, Dave?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is for Romano Parker and Associates, for 1608 Meriden Waterbury Road. We requested a full set of plans, so we're still waiting for those.
So do we have a motion to table this item as well?
Mr. Chair, make a motion, we approve a table for item 8B on the agenda.
Great. Do we have a second?
Second.
Santiago with a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Item 8C, citing the Cheshire Community YMCA application for extension of earth excavation for the removal of 125,912 cubic yards of material, property located at 1,000 East Street in an R80 zone, parcel size 141.6 acres, EE 141.1. This was tabled from June 15th. Mr. Judas is here to give us the lay of the land.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to recuse myself for items C and D on. tonight,
Okay,
just,
so we'll recuse Commissioner Gwark on items C and D tonight. We'll sit Commissioner Coles on those items, so prepare yourself, Commissioner. Thanks, Jeff. Hey, Jeff, could you get the lights for us, while?
Yeah,
Thank
make
you.
yourself.
You know, if you're up, please, by all means.
You got
He's gonna earn his
superseded.
pay one way or the other.
An item in motion will remain
I just gotta share it,
That's
right? So that you can-
simple physics.
Shared.
if I need to share multiple documents, I just have to.
Hey,
switch
Dave?
it off.
Yeah.
When you're talking, could you talk into the mic? Because I can't really hear you. And I don't know if the. Thank you.
Yeah, we're just limited with this because of the feedback, but I'll do my best to project more into that.
Thank you, Dave.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. For the record, Stephen Judas with the Office of Harry Cole and Son, at 876 South Main Street in Plantsville. Yeah, I think so. I'll call you back if we can't figure it out. Just trying to share this so the people at home can see what we're talking about. So tonight I'm here on behalf of the YMCA. We've been on the agenda for a while, but your meetings have been running too long, so I've been avoiding your meetings and requesting
Yes, it is.
tables. I did sit through one of them, but after that I learned my lesson. So we're here tonight on behalf of the YMCA Camp Sloper. This application actually had been approved by this commission quite some time back. This was for an earth excavation of Sloper Pond. Sloper Pond is a great facility, a great feature at Camp Sloper. But unfortunately, it's an over 100-year-old pond. It was man-made, but it's been slowly filling in sediment and silt due to different erosion around the site, mostly on the eastern end of the property. So let's point around here. Our original proposal was to remove approximately 115,000 cubic yards of material from the site. 125,000 cubic yards of material from the site. We were proposing to do a mechanical dredge. This was the original plan that the commission had approved. We're proposing to, I guess I'm going to use my cursor here so people at home can see what we're doing. We're proposing to drain the pond in its entirety, construct a berm all along the northern edge of the pond to take water from the streams that run into the pond and discharge them through a point, existing dam at this location, and do some mechanical dredging with backhoes and dump trucks and bulldozers. A very intrusive operation, but at the time we felt that that was the best scenario for the pond. This was approved by the Wetland Commission in town, it was approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission. We went to Army Corps of Engineers and the DEP with the plan, was approved by those departments as well. And it went out to bid, but the bid numbers came back just way too excessive. The YMCA has a certain amount of money they allocated for this project, and our lowest bid was double that. So we've kind of taken the last year or so to take a step back, reevaluate our proposal and change our methodology. So we're proposing basically this end result, except we're not proposing to drain the pond. We're going to do a wet dredge. There will be a barge, a small barge that floats around on the pond and dredges to specific depths as depicted on our plan. We're still going to propose all of the amenities and features and improvements that the original plan had. We're just not going to have to drain the pond. So we feel that this is a much more environmentally friendlier application. It will be done over a series of 2 years. We'll do a fall dredge, and then the materials will sit in 2 designated areas, which are outlined on the plan, brown areas. Will be pumped into filter bags. These are large 7-foot diameter bags, any length. And those bags will be allowed to sit and dewater over a period of a couple of months, either the winter months or the summer months when camp is in operation. The other issue is we still have to run a camp through the summer here, and having water in the pond is always beneficial for the campers. So as each drying takes place, at the end of that, the bags are then opened and the material is trucked off-site. We do have a location just up the road in Berlin that has agreed to accept material from the site. That was one of the issues that we struggled with at our first approval. But now we know that within a couple miles up the road, we have a location for this material. And this process of pumping, dredging, dewatering will happen over a 6-month period, and then they'll start the second phase. And then again, the third phase, basically spring and fall is when we're proposing for this operation to happen over a 2-year period. We have gone to the Wetland Commission, received approval of our site plan modification. We have notified the Army Corps of Engineers. We're starting the process with Army Corps and DEP, but this is another step in the process. A modification approval from this board is necessary for us to move forward. Hopefully I explained the process pretty well. Do you have any questions for me about what we're proposing to do?
Any questions for members of the commission on this? Commissioner Walski?
Yes, sir.
My question would be, you said the material is going to be brought to Berlin.
Yes, sir.
Where in Berlin is it going?
There is a farm up Southington Road on the right-hand side across from Timberland Golf Course. It's owned by Mr. McCacci. And he has agreed to let us fill in a portion of his property that had been excavated previously. So that's where we
And
believe.
that's all approved by Berlin
That's our
officials?
next step. That's our next step as well.
Just wanted to check. So you expect it to be about the 115,000?
Well,
After it sits, it'll probably
actually-
reduce somewhat and compact?
it should reduce considerably because the bottom of the pond is very wet. It's not sand and gravel. It's very silty, wet material, holds a lot of water. We believe that really that number will come down considerably once it dewaters. So
Is
by
the,
conventional methods, we're figuring 115,000 yards. It's hard to tell,
right,
but we think that number could come down as much as 25 to 30%.
because you're doing it off of barges?
Right.
It'll
And
be
just that the material at the bottom is so fluid. It's so,
similar to what the Silver Lake project from 10 or so years ago?
yeah, I'm not extremely
Plus-
familiar with that one, but yeah,
Okay.
that's my understanding.
You all set, Steve?
Yes, thank you.
Commissioner Santago?
Yeah. Hi, Steve. So it's 100, Slopers is 100 years old?
I think it's more than that, actually.
I think I was there opening day. I
Yeah.
can't remember.
100 years ago.
Certainly half of it. So when you're doing this, is Slopers, like, is the day camp still going to be operational during this whole thing?
It actually will be. The areas of dewatering will be fenced with safety fencing, chain link fencing and so on. And they'll
Yeah.
be slatted, so it's not something the kids will
Just
be.
concerned safety for campers and all that kind of thing, because it's a pretty big construction effort, you
This
know?
is actually much smaller than what we were originally proposing. The original proposal had trucks going back and forth to the dewatering areas. We had access drives and things like that would have made the camper, let me back up a little bit though. The camp typically starts in June. So our hope is that the spring session will end before campers in this situation.
Okay.
With this scenario. So I misspoke there. The previous application, we were going to run it through the summer during camp.
Okay,
So in this application, we're actually going to proposing to stop when camp starts. And then the bags will just sit and dewater. So they will be fenced, so the campers can't get at them. But the operation actually won't happen during the camping season or during the polar plunge. So you'll be able to jump in.
Forgot about that one, yeah. So, I mean, this year it seems like it rains every day,
Yes.
and who knows what weather happens?
Mhm.
So does this, your plan says, well, over the course of 2 years, I'm assuming, or maybe I shouldn't assume, that should adverse weather continue that way, that your plan may be altered a little bit? Or do you think 2 years is a pretty good estimate, given what you know?
So surprisingly, with this plan, the bad weather doesn't really alter the operation because the pond will maintain the level of water that it has, whether it rains or not. It really only, it doesn't affect, it only affects the poor guys on the barge that are operating the barge when it's raining out, really. So it shouldn't, it's actually a much better scenario for foul weather than the previous proposal.
Okay,
So we don't anticipate the erosion issues and things like that we would have had with the previous
Gotcha.
application. So we
And-
think this is a much a bigger improvement. It's not as detailed, you know, with the depths.
Yeah.
But we have a plan and we can.
Great. And so I get why a site plan would be in front of us, but the earth excavation, that's in front of us, why?
Well, technically, because we're removing material from the site. So because we're taking more than, I believe it's 20,000, 10,000?
10,000%.
I think 10, any site in town that you're removing or placing more than 10,000, importing or exporting more than 10,000 cubic yards requires an earth excavation. So
So
technically, we fall
technically, that's why it's before us versus just you're moving
Yes.
dirt.
Yep.
Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay.
Just one question, Mr. Chairman. Steve,
Sounds
j- so the material is going to go into those brown spots, those
Yes,
brown
sir.
locations?
Yep.
And it's going to be on a barge. How do you get it from the barge to those locations? I guess you said they were in a big,
The-
some kind of a container.
The barge is relatively small, actually, and it is pumped through a 4-inch pipe that floats on the top of the water and then goes across the land, either to this location or there's a little.
Oh, okay, so it's not accumulated on the barge, only the pump
Not
is
at all.
on the
It's
barge.
just it pumps from the barge through the pipe to the bag, directly to the bag.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Sorry, I didn't explain that clearly.
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Volpe, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm looking at sheet E1 of the submitted site plans. I see that there's a couple proposed construction access points, and the way that it's displayed here, it's going to be done in phases. So are the access points going to be constructed in phases as well? And will those impact the terrain of the camp or interaction with the campers in any kind of way?
No, this would be done prior to camp opening. And the access points, this one is off along an existing trail right now. This is an old road that runs out to East Street that would have to be just cleared and improved, but again, it would happen prior to any campers on site. And then this one, there is an existing road that kind of comes through here, and we would just come off that road and go into this little corner. So we tried to pick areas that are not intrusive to the camp or the campers. And again, the campers will not be here when that activity is happening. And those access roads would probably remain. Well, this one would probably go, but this one would remain because the intent here is to provide a deep sump area. This is where most of the sediment comes into the pond. And the part of the improvement is to allow, we're going to put in a kind of a sluice gate here that allows them to lower the pond every winter, approximately 3 to 4 feet, to help with vegetation and also allow them to get in and pump this if there's any sediment accumulation. So hopefully in the future, 100 years from now, they won't have to do this. They'll just have to clean this little area out and they won't have to deal with the whole pond. We're trying to look forward as we're fixing things today.
Great, thank you.
You all set, Christine?
Yes.
Yep. Any other questions?
Yes,
Commissioner
one.
Coles, sorry, Sue.
Please.
Thank you. Once that material is dredged and everything and it's sitting there, does it have to be tested before it gets moved?
We've actually tested the pond already. During the winter, we brought barges or drilling mechanisms out onto the pond, and we did borings throughout the pond to see what type of material was there. And it was tested by a lab, and it actually came back very clean. So the material, the lab was actually surprised how good the material in the pond is. It's not great from a construction standpoint. If it was gravel, everyone would be much happier, but it's clean. So, and the owner in Berlin also wants it to be assured that it's clean material as well.
Now,
So
if first say that it fell through in Berlin, do you have another alternative?
we don't, that's part of Berlin was kind of a godsend, to be honest with you. We had a lot of different places that we looked at and owners that we talked to about different sites. But this has taken a lot longer than we anticipated. But the Berlin site is vacant. It's open. It's a big field, and there's already an access driveway. So we don't anticipate any difficulty with that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Coles, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to follow up on a couple of our, my fellow commissioners' questions. So you said that there was bore testing done. To what depths did they hit ledge?
They did not hit ledge, no.
Really? Okay. And then if you could, for the record, just tell us about the depth that the existing pond is and what our target depth is.
The existing pond's approximately 8 feet deep, and our target depth's approximately 15 feet deep. So it's not a huge change, but there's more excavation, around the sides of the pond. And there's some areas of the pond, I'll use the cursor, the west corner, find my cursor. Oh, I can't find it, so people at home will have to take my word for it. In this area over here, the material there is very, very deep. They actually never hit, they couldn't hit bottom over there. It was a lot of peat moss and things like that. So some areas they won't be able to, get too deep with it because of the type of material there. They'll just be digging forever. But the idea is really just to get the pond deep enough so the plant life doesn't grow.
Good. Thank you.
And I'm sorry, we're also going to repair the beaches. The beaches, there's 2 beaches, a East Coast beach and a West Coast beach. Those beaches would be repaired as part of the this proposal.
So for that, would new material be brought in?
That would be new material. That would be there's a mat that goes under it and a sand material at the top of that.
And that's nowhere near 10,000 cubic?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right. Thank you.
All set? Any other questions from members of the commission? Steve, anything else?
That's it. We're excited about getting this moving forward. It's been a long time in the works, and we're hoping that we can get this going hopefully by next spring.
Okay, great. So at this time, we'll entertain a motion on this item.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we approve EE 141-1.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Locks. Any further discussion on this? Dave, can you call the roll, please?
Sure. Commissioner Volpe,
I'm sorry, did he say my name?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm.
Commissioner Wowski,
Yes.
Commissioner Locks,
Yes.
Commissioner Coles,
Yes.
Commissioner Santiago,
Yes.
Vice Chair Salka,
Yes.
Chair Hammersley.
Members is a yes, motion passes 7-0. Item 8D, Toda Hill, Southington Cheshire Community YMCA site plan application to remove sediment from Sloper Pond, install new low-level outlet pipe with discharge to wetlands, replace existing trail culverts, clear trees, shrubs from existing dam, and install education/recreational amenities such as handicap access boardwalks, rope swing and viewing platforms, property located at 1,000 East Street in an R80 zone, parcel size 141.6 acres, SPR number 1819. This was tabled from June 15th.
Mr. Chairman, again, Steve Judith, the Harry Collinson. I think most of my previous presentation would apply to this application as well.
Okay. Any questions on the site plan from any members of the commission? Seeing none, do we have a motion?
Wait, I have a question.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Hold off for a second. Commissioner Volpe, go ahead.
Where is the existing dam? Is that a silly question? I've grown up here, but I'm not sure.
I didn't know there was a dam either.
And are the recreational educational amenities going, like, where are the boardwalks? I'd just like to see it real quick. If you don't mind.
Yeah, if I can get this to go.
No worries.
There we go. You know what? It might be easier for me to show it to you on this plan. So the dam location, there's existing spillway located. Can you see the arrow here?
Yep.
Yep.
Right at this location. The two beaches I talked about, this is the West Coast Beach and this is the East Coast Beach. We're proposing a handicap accessible fishing pier at this location. We have a tow rope boat. The idea is to get a glass bottom boat with a tow rope that we can go back and forth between these two docks from one end to the other. Just educational. The kids can kind of look through the bottom of the boat and see what's happening. We have a little, it's hard to see, but there's a little expanded fishing pier at this location, so they can fish off of this pier. And then we have a couple other features that are more, we're proposing to sink some trees for habitat for fish. And we also, the coolest thing I think we have is we have some logs that we're going to secure with anchors for turtles to climb up on. So throughout the pond, we'll have a good sized log that close to shore that the turtles can kind of climb up on and sun themselves. We think the kids will enjoy that. So those are the main features that we're proposing for the campers.
Great, thank you.
You point out. So it's an earthen dam, Mr. Chairman, right?
No, actually, this dam is an existing dam and it's concrete,
Okay.
concrete spillway. And we're not proposing to modify that at all.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
it?
Where would the low-level outlet pipe go?
So right next to the dam, we're proposing a pipe. You see this red line that runs in through here?
Mhm.
And so this pipe would go into the water and there will be like a manhole structure on the shore. And under the cover of that manhole structure will be a sluice gate that they can operate open, and that water would then run down this pipeline into a spillway at the edge of the wetlands. So that'll allow us to lower the water level in the wintertime.
Thank you, that's all I had. I
Okay.
appreciate the visual though.
Yep. Any other members of the commission have any questions for the
Just to
applicant?
follow up on that.
Commissioner Coles, go ahead.
So as the spillway comes out, is there going to be like riprap there or something like that? So,
And this spillway, it's a very small orifice. It's not designed to let a big flow through. It's actually designed to lower the pond at a very slow rate. It's not really, the spillway itself can handle large storms and things like that. And when the pond is lowered, if there's a large storm, the pond itself will retain the same amount of water that it would previously.
thank you, Mr. Chair.
You all set?
Yep.
Anyone else? See none. We're looking for a motion on this item.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to approve SPR 1819.
Motion, Commissioner Salka, do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Coles with a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Dave, can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Volpe,
Commissioner Volpe, a yes?
Commissioner Walowski,
Yes.
Commissioner Locks,
Yes.
Commissioner Coles,
Yes.
Commissioner Santiago,
Yes.
Vice Chair Salka,
Yes.
and Chair Hammersley.
Hammersley's a yes. Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you very much for
Yep.
your consideration.
Item 8E, Calco Construction and Development LLC, site plan modification of existing buildings with drive-through to coffee shop, with drive-through and retail property located at 812 Queen Street in a B zone, SPR number 1822. And we are reseating.
No. I'm just keeping the seat warm.
You did a great job, Caleb. Jeff, you're back in the saddle.
I'm not getting along with your laptop here, but I'm trying.
Two.
Okay.
Queen
Oh,
Street.
I opened the wrong one.
That's the wrong one. That's Trinity Point. That looks better.
I still have to figure out how to share it. So. Okay, Mr. Chairman, for the record again, Stephen Judas with the Office of Harry Cole and Son at 876 South Main Street in Plantsville. We're here on behalf of Calco. Calco Construction Development LLC. This proposal is for 812 Queen Street. This is a business owned property that was previously a People's Bank with an existing drive-through. It's next to the Port of Vallarta, which is the building just to the north, which is right in this location. That's the Smashburger Plaza. I'm sure everyone here is familiar with it. And to the south is the ShopRite Plaza. Burger King's located in this location. This is existing site with existing parking and existing drive-through. We are proposing to modify the drive-through. We're proposing to extend the drive-through a little bit. We're going to take this area of pavement, and we're going to propose grass in that area. Proposing to add a small curb island in this location and an outside patio, paver walkway around the front. We're going to restripe the handicap spaces. We're going to modify the curb in this location, and then we're going to re-landscape and recurb the spaces along the front of the property. This island would remain the same. So we also, I think, we added a loading zone also in back by the dumpster location. So this is going to be a change of use. It's going to be a Subway shop and not a Subway, a sub or grinder shop rather. Let me rephrase that. And a coffee shop, and not a Dunkin' Donuts. And we're just proposing to update the site, modify it, bring it into more into conformance with your regulations, and also provide a better queuing lane for proposed cars in the drive-through. We did receive comments from your staff, and we responded with responses as well. And I'm here to answer any questions you might have about the application.
Okay, so let's start with responses that were received by staff. Dave, are you satisfied with those responses? or-
Mr. Chairman, I don't have any outstanding issues other than I think there was just going to be a slight revision for the parking.
Beautiful. Well done.
Um,
I don't know how to mute anybody.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think those front spaces adjacent to the street, we're going to do some plantings in front of them, right?
Yeah, one of the requests was to put a berm here and put some planting, so we didn't have time to modify the plan, but I did respond to the comments that we would make that.
You're okay with that, Steve?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So any questions of members of the commission?
Yeah, I do.
For sure, Santiago.
So I give you credit for repurposing a building.
Mhm.
So buildings that are vacant doesn't do anything to anybody,
All right.
anything good to anybody, it lays vacant. So I'll give the applicant credit for coming up with a new and creative way to do something
Mhm.
with that. My question though is, between this building today and Puerto Vallarta is a very nice outdoor dining
Yeah. That's
area where the walkway is. I mean, they have some really nice tables out there and all that kind of thing. Have we
Well,
shared
unfortunately,
that with them or like what's up with that?
this property owner owns that property
Yeah,
as well. So
right.
that's a temporary situation. It was COVID, they put the
Yeah.
igloos up and things like that. But unfortunately, once this building becomes occupied, that would cease.
Yeah, because I mean, because a lot of restaurants are struggling
Mhm.
and the outside provides them a good,
They do have,
Vehicle.
but they do have outside dining
yeah,
in
in
front of their
front they have
building.
some. You
Yes,
know,
they do.
outside, in front they have some, and I don't know, since it is the applicant who owns that property, if, because I'd hate to have Puerto Vallarta suffer, you minus, you plus one thing and minus another, and they have I mean, it's a very nice area they have there. In between, I don't know if he could do anything else, given, the town has some leeway on some stuff there.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Chairman, it would be an issue because it would offset the parking requirements.
It would,
As
huh?
nice as it is, he may try and come in later,
Yeah.
once this is approved. I think there'll be state influence on that in terms of allowing more outdoor dining, maxing some parking requirements, but
Okay.
all of it, and he could always come in to.
Yeah, because I
provide
think
approval.
hopefully something like that could happen, because I would hate for that business, which is, a good asset for the town too, to
I agree.
be adversely impacted. So if,
I can assure you that the applicant really doesn't want to hurt himself.
Right,
So I'm
exactly
sure
right.
He's had that
So,
conversation with
you know,
Porter.
driving over there, I was like, ooh, that goes away if that is. So I'm
It does.
hoping, we don't hurt them. I could think, kind of think ahead for them.
I think that if they needed it, there's probably options to expand the parking in front of their building a little further to give
Okay.
them more space for outside dining at that location.
Yeah. Okay.
So you may see us back for that.
Okay, all right,
You all set, Peter?
yes.
Okay. Any other questions from members of the commission?
Mr. Chairman, just- I'm
Commissioner
sorry.
Coles?
Steve, how many parking spaces within the total complex are there? Because I can only see like 4.
Well, so I don't have the total complex, because we were really looking at our proposal, like these two properties kind of work together.
Because on the layout, when you look out, I only see like 4 or 5 parking spaces. And I'm sure there must be more, but I
Yeah.
don't.
I think
Mr.
there's
Chairman,
more
bear
to
with
the,
me, I'm sorry.
to
Oh, yeah,
the,
there's
to
a
the
lot.
west and to the
We have
south.
32 spaces total on the site.
Yeah,
There's parking spaces in the back, for employees, and we're proposing some additional striped spaces here.
Okay, because they're not marked, that's all.
There's 2 handicap spaces in the front, and there's actually spaces, a double row of spaces here and here. And then there's spaces in this location, and then there'll be some spaces along this area here. So there's quite a bit of parking on this site, but this site also works with the site next door. So some of this parking will flow on that site, and some of that parking will flow on
Okay,
this site.
okay, thank you.
Yep.
That's
And
it,
just to
Mr. Chairman.
point it, these sites work together, as the commission really prefers, and there's also a cut through in the back. So you can get into the ShopRite Plaza. You don't have to go onto Queen Street.
Right, right.
I honestly cut through there all the time to get out to Aircraft Road. So it's actually, it's one of the ones in town where I think it has achieved the goals of this
Actually
commission.
works, yeah.
Yeah.
Commissioner Coles?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the one question I have, and I'm looking at the submitted site plan, but I also like to look at the GIS. And my only concern is that the entrance, as you start to go into the queuing line, between the structure of the building and the property line is pretty narrow, and it looks like the vehicles, I don't know if there's going to be spillover. Well, I understand that the same owner owns both properties.
Mhm.
My concern is that at some future use, there might be a sale of the property, which would then put
There are cross easements on these
Perfect.
properties, so they can intertwine from here on out in the
excellent,
future as well.
perfect answer. Thank you, Mr.
You
Chair.
all set? Any other questions from members of the commission? Steve, just one question. That area that Caleb was just talking about,
Mhm.
right here? What's the divides those cars from that? We'll call it a walkway. It's a dining area right now, but what,
It's actually the bypass. It's the bypass for the drive-through. So vehicles can actually get, if they don't go into the drive lane, they can go around.
the drive around,
Yeah, drive.
exit on the other side? Okay,
It's actually a paved surface.
okay. Commissioner Coles,
If I may,
go ahead.
so that will be striped also to kind of
Yeah,
delineate.
we have a stripe that kind of comes up to the 4th car, and we can extend it if that's, if you think that'd be better, we can extend that up to the front of the building.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful just because, as if we want to keep those, it's essentially 2-lane traffic, to segregate those two, it might be helpful
yeah.
to bring it out as
Two-lane,
far
but
as
go only
possible.
one direction. They're both going to go, it's only one way.
Yep.
I think that's a good idea.
Thanks, Caleb. Good idea. Any other questions or comments from members of the commission? Commissioner Ward?
This was originally planned to be a Dunkin' Donuts, and the queue on those is usually out to the street. Since it's sandwich shop and coffee shop, you don't anticipate the queue backing up to Queen Street?
I don't. It's not a Dunkin' Donuts,
Okay.
the other one.
It's the only thing, because it would block out that whole intersection. Then
It
it'd be
would,
tight.
and again, part of it was to get the 14 cars, and that was the reason for extending the queue, but they don't anticipate having that issue.
So let me ask you a question, Steve. In the back, the rear of that building, it looked like it really doesn't get used that much.
Mhm.
And to be honest with you, I wasn't even aware that that was there until I drove out there recently to look at it because of the application. So I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity along the lines of some of the conversation up here to push that line back a little bit to allow for greater queuing and less likelihood that it's going to spill out into Queen Street in the event that we have the world's busiest coffee shop slash sandwich station, which would be great, right? But
I think, the thing that I think that's not a bad idea, but again, one of the things that we tried to maintain was the ability for people from ShopRite Plaza to continue to travel through this area. So if you look at this curb, this is a curb cut
Yeah.
here, and you'll have cars traveling around the back of the building. So we want to make sure that we can still have wide enough for 2-lane traffic to get around the drive-through lane and the parked cars out there. So I think if it's a problem, we can extend this lane if we had to, but I don't anticipate it being an issue. And I think that if we go further, we have some bigger fish to fry as far as how to make this site work. So.
yeah. Okay,
I have a question.
Commissioner Volpe?
So currently, if we were to look at it, because I'm looking at it on Google Street View, there are 3 lanes where the previous bank was. So considering that we know it's now the other guys, those tend to get pretty packed. As a coffee shop in general gets pretty packed, right? I'm wondering if there has been a consideration, since it does seem that there is room on the southern side from what we're looking at right now. I'm just a little concerned. Are you going to be able to get sandwiches at the drive-through as well, or is it strictly
No.
coffee?
Just strictly coffee.
So if it's the only drive-through, let's say Starbucks in our town, hypothetically, one could say that it could get pretty jammed over here.
It's
Right.
possible, yeah.
Okay. I just don't know if there's been a consideration to do the 2-lane drive-through. Is that because the
I don't-
building
I
is
don't-
too close in the north?
Typically when we have drive-through lanes, we want a bypass lane.
Yeah.
So in this situation, we have a drive-through and a bypass on the north, and we have the drive-through and we have a small island separating the drive-through lane from the bypass lane. So the idea is to have the drive-through and the bypass. And I don't know how we would fit two. I just don't know if that would work. I can tell you that, the company that is moving in here doesn't want to move into a site where it's not going to work.
Mhm.
They're not going to invest the money in in this location if it's not going to meet their needs. So I believe that, they've vetted this out quite a bit. They had us make changes. They reviewed the plans. And this is what they think fits their model for the area. So I think we have to take hopefully some, there may be certain times of the day when it's busier, I would assume, than others, but I think that what we're proposing is going to work well for them.
Thank you. And I do agree, because it is a quite large parking lot in general. My concern was coming from a place of, there isn't a light right there, right? And so I do typically what you said, and I'll go in at one of the safer places to enter, like by
Right.
Burger King or shop, because you are risking your life over here at certain points of the day. So I just worry that if it is too congested, if people are like, oop, let me cut through here, let me cut through there. I do think it's beneficial to have that lane. I just worry about how congested the plaza will become with this popular new addition.
I
Just got
hate
flooded
to
out.
say, but congestion is good for
Yeah,
businesses.
you're
That's,
I
they
appreciate
they
it.
do want a little bit of congestion, and there are times when that plaza can get busy, but it's vibrant and it's good. And it may not be as great to cut through, but it's better to have it busy than vacant.
I agree. Thank you.
There are 3 lanes on that drive-through side right now. So-
They're very tight. I think we're proposing 12.5-foot, a 12-foot drive-through and a 12.5-foot with a small 5-foot island. So we could possibly eliminate the island and try to do, but I don't know how we would service 2 drive-through lanes, that when you're dealing with a Dunkin' Donuts, they have a whole model for actually 3 lanes now. They have a drive-through lane, an order online lane, and then an app lane, but they all kind of merge in together if people are playing nice. But it's still,
Right.
well, they're new. They haven't really, they're just starting to come out with them. We just did one in East Hartford. And in theory, if the person at the menu board lets you pull in, it's all going to work. But if they don't, we could have a little road rage out there at Dunkin' Donuts. So we don't
Concerned with that.
anticipate that volume, and I'm not sure how another drive-through lane would really work.
Our only sort of issue that I would raise is that this is the only time we get to see this. And if it becomes a safety issue, then it's a safety issue caused by an application that we didn't or maybe it could be argued that we didn't think through completely. So just to play devil's advocate perhaps, the way out of that drive-through would be through that road, that connecting road to the ShopRite Plaza. And it wouldn't need to be to the south on there. And I'm just trying to prevent a queuing problem. And, you know, I look at the Dunkin' Donuts further down the street on Queen Street, which has a great drive-through because it takes you all the way in back. You got to go all the way behind and come around, and there's not a queuing problem there. But yet the one down the street here on North Main has a significant problem,
But that-
actually from both directions. And that part of Queen Street is a lot busier than North.
I don't think you can compare those sites with this site. It's a different model. It's a different business model. But I also think from a safety perspective, this property owner and this user does not want to create a safety issue. I mean, everyone's sensitive to safety.
Yeah, Mr.
I mean,
Chairman.
this is. Go ahead.
They-
To that point, there is a standard out there and it meets the standard queue of 14 cars. I believe that's the recommended state queue.
Mhm.
So we always look for that in the design. So if that, helps you a little bit to say
Yeah.
that it meets a standard, it's not substandard by any.
And I think there is room under extreme conditions where we could go above 14, but there's room to do it if need be. And I think having the bypass lanes to the north and the south give people the flexibility to either leave on Queen Street, to leave on Aircraft Road, or to go into the ShopRite Plaza. I think it's better to have that flexibility. Someone may have trouble pulling out on Queen Street the first time they come, and the next time they come, they're going to go to Aircraft Road and hit the light, or they're going to go into ShopRite Plaza and hit the light. So I think having that movement through the plaza is a positive thing for this site.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I do have
Yep,
one more.
Commissioner Volpe?
So I'm just looking at the plan and it kind of dawned on me that the handicap spaces are kind of right in front of the queue line.
Mhm.
Is that where they currently are? Was that just the decision was to bring it close to the building?
I believe that they're currently there. They're not striped properly, but also, the idea was to get them away from the 14 cars. That's kind of the queue. And I mean, you probably could fit more than 14 if you look at the way we've depicted the 14 cars. They're not bumper to bumper. But the idea is to keep the handicap spaces as close to the building as possible.
Okay.
All set?
Yeah, I'm all set.
Okay. So do we have a motion on this?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion. We approve SPR 1822.
Motion for Commissioner Salka. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Locke. Any further discussion? Dave, can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Gork,
Yes.
Commissioner Volpe,
Yes.
Commissioner Walewski,
Yes.
Commissioner Locks,
Yes.
Commissioner Santiago,
Yes.
Vice Chair Salka,
Yes.
Chair Harrison.
Thank you very
Yes. 7-0, motion passes. Moving on to item F, Buck LLC site plan application to construct building and parking area for offices, storage, and warehousing. Property located at 50 Mastriani Place in an I2 zone, SPR number 1823.
All right, it's me again.
Jesus, Steve's day.
Review this.
I haven't been here in a while, so. I'm just
See how we
saying-
lined everything up in order for
It's
you?
perfect.
For Steve.
So this is an application of Buck LLC at 50 Mastriani Place. 50 Mastriani Place is an I2 zone located kind of off the trail, off of Burt Street. There's this lot and there's another vacant lot to the north. This lot we're proposing, just go through, it's an I2 zone parcel. It's 1.81 acres. It's currently vacant and relatively open. There's a detention basin to the southeast corner. You can see those lines there. They depict kind of the top and the bottom of an existing detention basin that handles water from Mastriani Drive. We're proposing to make some modifications to that for our application. The site's serviced by public water and public sewers, and we're proposing an 8,250 square foot building in two phases. Phase 1 would be 5,000 square feet, and phase 2 would be 3,250. We have a paved parking lot in the front of the building. The building is going to be a wood frame structure on the front, and then it's going to slope down in the back. And on the back side, there'll be drive-under garage bays on the back of the building. And we have sidewalks and handicap spaces and landscaped islands along the front and a storm drainage system that collects water that brings it back to the detention basin. We're proposing to modify, as I said, that basin a little bit to help our site achieve a zero increase in peak runoff. And the dark green buffer is a 50-foot buffer, residential buffer to our 2025 zones and residential homes to the south. And the land to the east is vacant at the moment. Might have been zone changed. I was thinking about that today, but right now we have that buffer per your requirements. Proposing street trees and landscaping as your regulations require, and the applicant's pretty excited to get this going. This road has been built for 20 years and nothing's ever been built there. So finally, we're gonna get some construction and get some tax revenue on those lots. So, any questions for me?
Great, Steve. Any questions from members of the commission? I think that there were some planning comments on this. On this one, have they been addressed adequately?
Not yet. There's outstanding comments, engineering and.
There was outstanding comments in
Yeah,
engineering.
if you have any questions for me, other than that, we can table it for tonight.
Yeah, I think we'll just wait till you get back on there, but we'll entertain any questions from members of the commission on this application at this time. Don't see any. Could we get a motion to table this?
Mr. Chairman, make a motion to table SPR 1823.
Second?
Second.
Commissioner Santaga with a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Steve. I think this might be your last one on the agenda tonight, but item G, Central Connecticut Resource Recovery LLC, site plan modification to an existing site plan, reducing a portion of landscape buffer from 50 feet to 20 feet. Property located at 65 Triano Drive in an I2 zone, SPR 1687.2. Mr. Judas.
Yes. Good evening again. Just trying to.
Just while Steve is doing that, I would just let everybody know we're going to take a short recess after we act on this application, just to provide a bathroom break before we go into the next item on the agenda.
So this application, Mr. Chairman, is for CCRR, Connecticut, Central Connecticut Resource Recovery. This is for 65 Triano Drive. This is a site plan that we had, this commission had approved probably 3 to 4 years ago. And we had been back before this commission recently requesting a modification of a landscape buffer. This smaller picture gives us an idea of where the site's located. Lazy Lane is along the bottom here. This is Triano Drive at this point. And the site is accessed actually through this lot, which is also owned by the applicant. And there's another building at this location. And the area in question is along this property line right here. There is an easement that runs in through this area, and there's another easement that runs this way. I go to the map above, idea of the property lines and the easements. Triano Drive here, our access comes in through this location. This is the area that we're proposing. There's an access road that comes up this easement, through this easement, and goes into this location. And it's along this property line between this easement and this easement that we're proposing to modify buffer. As part of the plan, we proposed a 50-foot buffer in this area. The applicant has been working out there and had encroached into that buffer. They had posted a bond for that encroachment, but in the meantime, we had proposed to come in and modify that buffer, I think down to a 10-foot plan, and that I believe was denied by this commission. We kind of went back to the drawing board. We came up with a plan that we think is much more beneficial to neighbors, to the town, and to the applicant. What we've done is we've proposed, if you look at the cross section in the lower corner of the drawing, we're proposing from the property lines, there are some existing trees that would remain. Proposing a 2-to-1 slope that comes up to a bench. Proposing arborvitae, green giant arborvitaes on the top, and landscaping along the berm, and then a block wall on the other side. And we think that the block wall would help with noise. We believe it would help with visibility. There won't be any visibility to the site. And it also will help with creep. There won't be any creep into the buffer. And we think that, that we're hoping that this commission would find this more favorable than our last proposal. I see the applicant here, and I believe that he wanted to say a few words about what they're proposing and the need they have for this space. So
As Jack makes his way up there, just a quick question. That black wall faces the neighbors or faces the interior?
faces the interior of the site. So
Okay.
the neighbors would only see the trees, the berm, and
Got
the
it.
arborvitae's at the top.
Jack, just name and address,
Yeah,
please.
good evening, everyone. Jack Perry, 153 Moore Hill Drive, also one of the owners of Central Connecticut Resource Recovery. So I know Steve presented something earlier. We went back to the drawing board. Our company is well-known in town as HQ Dumpsters and Recycling. We're very involved in the community, and we try to keep the relationship with all of the community at the best that we possibly can by mitigating any noise complaints that we may have, even if we're operating in the realm of collection times that is permitted by the town. So again, this is abutted to a residential zone, and a lot of Lazy Lane has been turned into commercial. So our goal here is to mitigate anything. So how we got here today is in this area, there was some giant trees that we ended up working with a tree harvester to come in and harvest the trees so that it wouldn't be just turned into firewood or green waste material, which would be known as mulch. So because of the large canopies, there was a lot of like small seedlings, brush, there was really nothing. So we didn't take down any trees in the buffer, but just like any operation, you start operating and guys, things move around a little bit. So we figured that by building a wall here and putting the landscaped side on the residential side, it comes at a cost to us, but at the same time, if that is ever developed down the road, we want to make sure that it's well landscaped and keeps the buffer as far as no longer encroaching noise, because up in that area that you see, there's going to be wood grinding and brush operations that we currently are doing. So up against the wall would also be stockpiling of mulch pretty much. So we would even be moving the machines farther away from the buffer. So technically, if you count in what we're going to be storing there, would be mulch, which would then get us even farther away. So we would be at all times not operating any machinery or trucks, well far past the 50 feet. So again, this comes at a greater cost because again, the blocks, the shrubbery. So we figured that this was the right thing to do to mitigate this issue that we ended up in front of you guys with.
Okay. Thanks, Jack. Steve, anything else before we open up to commission members or?
I think in the past, you'd asked me the length of the property line. I believe it's, wrote it down here somewhere, 725 feet is the length of the area we're proposing. We went back and forth on creating a berm, but still trying to give them a little more flexibility on working within that buffer area. Your regulations do permit you to vary the buffers in this scenario. So you do have the ability to let us do this or to come up with something. This is kind of unusual. We usually won't see something this high or this big or this long. But it's valuable land for them. It would be very helpful for their operation, but we were trying to think of the best way we could let them do what they need to do, but protect the abutting property for the future.
And this abuts residential zone property?
It's undeveloped residential zone, yes.
Okay.
It's 2025 or 2025, so it's half acre. I was pretty sure that was you, yes.
Okay.
So, all right, any questions for me?
Yeah,
about-
any questions for the applicant, for members of the commission on this? Mr. Volpe,
I'm happy to go second. I
Okay.
don't know, we all raised it at the
You're-
same time, so. I'll go
Commissioner
first.
Walowski, go ahead.
What's the material you're proposing for the wall?
The wall would be a block, concrete blocks. I believe they're 2 by 2 by 6. Or I'm sorry, 2 by 4 by 6.
2 by 2.
2 by 2 by 6. I was right the first time.
And the tree that you're showing, that's the existing tree line? There won't be any deciduous trees planted down on the bottom?
We were proposing to maintain the existing deciduous trees, but we're open to filling in areas
I was asking, in the representation, that's.
That's the existing,
Existing tree line?
existing tree line, right?
Okay.
There's a, proposed silt fence, the existing tree line, that any trees there would remain. And then the silt fence, the slope, we proposed perennials on the slope. And then the large arborvitae's at the top.
Good, Steve?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Volpe.
I believe Jeff was next.
Thank you. Do you anticipate any issues with roots up on top of the trees taking or falling down and the slope, drainage and all that for the green giants?
I don't believe so at the top of the slope, no.
So what is there, 6 feet you're proposing on the step up there?
Yes, yep.
And what about as far as erosion from the hill down to the silt fence?
We think that it would just continue along the berm. It's going to be well planted, so I don't anticipate any erosion. If there was any issues, we would obviously take care of them.
And then the last, so you're planning on 725 feet of an 8-foot high concrete block wall? Is it?
Christina?
My question was, I'm looking at the comments from the planning department. I guess my question is directed more to Dave. I'm looking at number 5. Will there be a variance required for this? Have we determined for the 8-foot wall?
So, that was I think that, we would look at walls like this. We have walls like, we have different this is a landscape wall, and typically landscape walls do not require variances. So my response to Mr. LaValle at the time was that we do landscape walls throughout town, varying from anywhere from 2 to 3 to 4 to 8, sometimes even taller, depending on the scenario. So they haven't required variances in the past, so we don't believe that this would require a variance as well.
Yeah, through the chair, I would say it would likely require a building permit,
Yes.
but not a variance. It is a retaining wall, so there is some load on it.
Great, thank you.
Good. Any other questions from
Oh,
members?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
If I could just revisit a previous so on the site plan, it does say, and I believe you touched on this, that install supplemental plantings as required. So if during the construction process, there were openings and gaps, you'd be open to putting
Absolutely.
trees in those spots. Okay.
We want to make a buffer.
You want to do it once.
Right.
Dave, did you have something?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would just want to check my list here again. I would just want to make sure that that's either hydroseeded with a tackifier on the backside or matted to get instant erosion control out there. There is some concern with that slope for erosion.
We would, anything over 3 to 1, we would propose a matting. So we would, tackifier is acceptable, but typically we would do matting.
Any other questions for members of the commission on this? Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Go
just
ahead.
one question. You've outlined and described the wall that you're going to put up. How different is that? Forget the height for a second, but from the planting standpoint versus what was on the original proposal that you bonded for? How different is sort of the planting and?
The original plan didn't propose any plantings in this 50-foot buffer. It was just a natural, whatever was there was to remain. We had larger trees, but you had more scrub brush at the lower level. So I think we think that this is going to be better than what was originally there because it'll be thicker and it'll be more of a wall of vegetation where the original vegetation was scattered.
The difference is that this proposal actually puts it closer to the property line though, correct?
It does, yes. And
50
that was
feet.
that was the reason to bring the height to make the berm and try to get the berm up high to create more of a visible barrier to the abutting property owners.
And what is to propose, what is to block, for example, the applicant from moving, I'm looking here and it says it's a 50-foot buffer from the outside line there to the left of the berm to that gray area. It shows 50 feet. What is to preclude the applicant from moving closer right up to the berm?
Well, the idea is to be able to use the land from that 50-foot line to the wall. So our proposal is to use
Well,
that.
why does it say a 50-foot buffer then?
That was
That's the original.
That was the
Got
original.
it.
right? I
Okay.
just wanted to make sure that I
So you-
depicted what was required on the plan.
Got it. Okay. Thank you very much.
What's up, Bob? Commissioner Coles?
One more. Would there be an opportunity to ask for some type of guarantee for X amount of years after it's planted, to ensure that whatever we have on top takes? That something that they'd be amenable to?
I think what David's saying is that he would like some sort of guarantee or bonding that he could inspect, and anything that has died would be replanted.
Just if you typically see a monoculture of one type of plant, if
Right.
there's a fungus or something that comes in and wipes them all out,
Yeah.
you don't have that security anymore.
Or how do you guys feel about that?
Mr.
John?
Chair, I
So-
think that's perfectly reasonable.
Yeah.
Well, let's ask the applicant how he feels about it.
I think it would be reasonable, and if there's a variation of planting that Mr. LaValle or the commission, to substitute some of the arborvitaes, we'd be happy to incorporate that as well.
Okay, so we have that on the record. Commissioner Coles, do you have a question? Thought I saw
He's
your hand.
waiting. He's
Go
waiting.
go ahead, Commissioner Coles, go ahead.
All right, I got my spot. So the top of the berm is a 6-foot ledge, correct? The proposed.
Yes.
So does that 6 feet include the 2 feet construction of the wall? Or is it 8 feet?
Now it's 6 foot, it's a 2-foot wall, 6-foot ledge, and then it's 12 feet to the property line.
Okay. And then the berm itself, is that going to be manicured, maintained, or is it just going to be planted with grass and let to go wild?
Believe the intent is to let it grow wild.
And to follow up on that too, I've mentioned this in other conversations, that my concern about some of these trees dying off, and then, we lose the benefit of that particular barrier. So I think it's a great idea to give an opportunity for the applicant to follow up.
I think that's fair to everyone involved. And I think that the idea of this is to propose a berm that lasts, and that's the best interest of the applicant for sure.
Oh, one last thing. And this might be a question for staff, but in a wall that height, is there a requirement for some sort of safety fencing at the top, or?
We're gonna have to check with the building department. We do have that ledge there, and I think it will depend on how well the arborvitaes fill in. We may need some safety fencing until they're completely grown, but we'll definitely verify that with the building department.
Thank you.
All set?
I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Gwart?
Just quick, how high do you intend on the material storage piles to get at their max?
They vary. I think
I can answer that. So again, it's going to be mulch for the most part. So again, we don't want to stack that too high because it becomes combustible in the heat, and then we'd have an internal fire in the pile. So again, the piles would obviously keep to minimal so that they're not too high, so that they don't get too hot.
You have
Give us an example.
Yeah, do you have a height?
Typically right now, I think we don't go over 12 feet with our piles, and we're constantly trying to keep them moving so that they don't combust, because that's a concern of ours, because it's obviously product, and anybody's product that catches fire, then it's no good. So
You're planning with this berm and the 8-foot high wall, and then the arborvitae's on top, that you shouldn't be able to see if everything's grown in?
correct.
Okay.
I think right now there's nothing over 10 feet back there.
All set, Jeff? Yep. Any other questions of the applicant from members of the commission? Seeing none, do we have a motion or further discussion on this item?
I'd like to make a motion.
Yeah, this is a site plan application. We don't take public input on a site plan application, so that's just part of our process. I understand that, and this is, again, a site plan application. Okay, Mr. Yorsky, your letter was submitted earlier, was shared with members of the commission. In a site plan application, we don't take public input. So that's the way our process works. I understand that, and you're not the applicant, so we only listen to the applicant, and then we received your letter, and it was put into the, share with every member of the commission, so it's not. You're really out of line. I understand what you're saying, so, but are there any further questions or comments or a motion from the commission?
Yes.
Commissioner Locke.
I'd like to make a motion to approve SPR 1687.2 with the stipulations that we either hydroseed or mat. And we also examine the plantings after a certain period of time.
You want to give us a timeline on that, Sue? Or
What do you
Dave,
think?
do you have a
Every
suggestion?
5 years or so? I mean, it takes a while before our
Yeah,
varieties.
Mr. Chairman, 5 would be.
5 would be
extension
good?
Of what we usually ask for, so that's asking, for belt and suspenders, so.
Okay, then 5 years.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second? Do we have a second on that motion? We don't have a second on that motion. Is there another motion that a member of the commission would like to make on that?
I'll second that motion.
Second by Commissioner Warwick. Any further discussion from members of the commission on this? Seeing none. Dave, can you
I'll-
call?
I'd like to
Oh,
discuss.
go
it a little
ahead,
bit.
Jeff, go
I don't know
ahead.
how
Sorry.
Everybody's feeling, I couldn't get everybody's leanings on this one. I like the 50-foot buffer. But this gives us a complete blockade. I know we're losing the 30-foot natural buffer, but this will give us an 8-foot high plus arborvitae's on top buffer to shield the neighbors and help with noise. With regular forest and all open space, the noise, the light, everything would get through to the neighbor's house. This provides I think, a nice solid 725-foot long wall, so.
Jeff, that's exactly how I felt. I felt that it was, giving the neighbors all opportunity to have it not seen from their houses. And I thought this was the best proposal they've come up with compared to the last one. And I think it would be great to move forward with this.
That's where I stand.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm kind of the mind that we have a 50-foot buffer that's required for a reason. I don't really see why that should vary from space to space in a space like this. I mean, that's a requirement of our regulations, and, our regulations are what our regulations are. If we think that those regulations are wrong, then there's a process for us to go through and make sure that that applies universally throughout the town. But the 50-foot buffer right now is a universal requirement. We have, over recent years, we'll all recall, have had neighbors who have come to us who have had people encroach upon that 50-foot buffer in a residential area that abuts an industrial area, and it's created problems for them. And I don't want to, and I'm not saying that Jack, I think Jack is a responsible citizen of the town, but again, our approval goes with the property, and who's to say that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 50 years from now, someone else comes in who doesn't care. And they're just going to do what they want to do. And I don't want to create that problem for future generations by doing this. So, I mean, that's my position, but.
Mr. Chair, your regulation does give the commission to accept different variations to reduce that buffer. So this would fall within that regulation to
Okay.
allow you to
Okay.
modify.
My concern is that
Commissioner Wallace, go ahead.
the wall becomes the line, and that the bucket loaders, everything, they're gonna move right up to that line. They're gonna scoop material off of that line. You're not gonna, that 30 feet of pile is now that much closer to the property line, regardless of what's up. If it's a 12-foot pile, a 20-foot pile, it doesn't matter. The machine itself is 30 feet closer to that property line,
Right.
the
Yeah.
working zone. So.
Well, if I could just say one quick thing. So again, 50 feet, what we're asking is from here to that wall. So if I put a tree there, shrub brush that was currently there, you're going to see straight through that. By me building a wall and then an arborvitae being above it, we are above this ceiling height, and you can no longer see our operation. The noise will be deflected from the arborvitaes in that wall. So what you guys are saying right now, it sounds like, is that there's some people that have concerns about the noise and being able to see things. I can say that, again, we've taken down trees on ours, and there's huge canopies in the scrub brush. I actually have photos of the winter time. We could see easily 100 feet into that property. So during the winter time, when all the little scrub brush is gone, you could easily see 100 feet into that property. So to say that somebody's going to build a house within 100 feet of that property line is going to be very likely. And when that happens, you're not going to have years of time for the vegetation to grow, to get to a point. You're going to see straight through it. You're going to have a 1,050 horsepower grinder back there grinding. Okay, we bought this property to be able to do what we're doing here. And I'm telling you that by building an 8-foot wall, it's going to isolate the noise and the visual impairments on that lot. So my only concern is, again, it's coming in front of you guys. You guys have the right to do this. And this is going to protect our neighboring lot. You know, everything that I've ever done in this town, it's been about the community and protecting people. So
we
nobody
get it.
could ever say that what I'm presenting here is
Hey,
going to
Hey,
hurt that
Jack,
property.
let's keep it on the application. And I'm not even sure, and I'll look to Jeremy, whether it's appropriate for you to be speaking after a motion's
I
been made
apologize.
or not. And I'm not, and look, I get you, you're a good guy. You're a responsible citizen. And as I said,
That's
this,
for the
this,
neighboring property.
this change goes with the property. So if you were to sell this property down the road sometime, or someone inherited it, or whatever the change of ownership might be, this stays with that. And that next person, or 2 people down the line, or 3 people down the line, they may not be as responsible or considerate as you are. So we have to be very careful about what we do and the long-term effects of any application or any change of buffer that we're considering. And as I said, you know, we had an application in here 2 years ago that looked to change a zone, in an industrial zone right on Curtis Street. You know the property, right? And that continues to be a problem. And we're probably going to have that application is going to come back in front of us for that piece of property in the next couple of months. And we're going to look at, what we did. And that was to subdivide the property to allow for smaller industrial lots. But this isn't any decision or my position is a reflection on you or the applicant. It never technically really is, but what it is just making sure that the use of the property is the best use of what we entail. And Jeremy, I'm just going to ask, is it appropriate for an applicant or anyone else, once a motion's in front of the board, for them to feed into that motion? I know, for example, that alternates are no longer allowed to talk once a motion is made if they're not seated. And I'm just wondering if an applicant has that opportunity to come in and sort of debate us on it.
Mr. Chair, you should probably leave it to just commissioners that are seated
Yeah.
once a motion is made and on the table.
So,
Understood.
yeah, I'm just trying to make sure we maintain some composure up here, but I appreciate your position. Commissioner Gwark.
Mr. Chair, is there any language that would ease some of your concerns? I know the application says reducing a portion of the landscape buffer from 50 feet to 20 feet. Now, is there any language that you would prefer seeing in there saying it maintained an 8-foot wall with the arborvitaes or any of that stuff, or any commission members at that point?
Yeah.
'Cause instead of just saying from 50 to 20, I see your point 10 years down the line. If it's in the books that it's just, it's a 20-foot buffer, then if somebody wants to tear down that wall and now they just have nothing and a 20-foot buffer, then I'm wondering if there's some language that we should add to our motion.
Well, I mean, I'll open that up to other commission members to comment. I mean, I think I kind of stated my position is that the 50-foot buffer is one that we should maintain, but Commissioner Santago?
I think Sue makes a very valid argument in regards to this proposal. I think the proposal is certainly better than the last one that went from 10. And so I think it's probably the best from their perspective. My issue, though, is kind of centered around what you said, Mr. Chair, and I still go back to how we got here. We got here because the 50-foot was infringed upon. And so now, how can it be made better? One option is to go back to 50 feet. Clean up what you did and go back to 50 feet and have a nice day. So that's one option, which I think we said last time. This is trying to make it better. I mean, if this is denied, do we come back, the applicant comes back to 30 feet? 40 feet? Or do we simply say 50 feet's 50 feet, you did a wrong thing, go back to where it was? Because the property owners on the other side are indeed impacted by that. So I'm kind of on the same lines as you, along with, I think this proposal is a good proposal based upon the applicant's perspective, but in the grand scheme of things, I don't think we got here in a good way. And so therefore, I'm more inclined to say, no, go back to 50. That's kind of where I was. I was kind of, I don't know if that's the thought process you got to. But I was, that's kind of where I was.
I think Jeff's question is one of, is there
Is there somewhere in between?
is there somewhere in between? Is there some compromise or some number out there? I mean, because you were here a couple months ago, Jack, with a, I think a 10 or 15 foot.
Yeah.
And now we've gone to 20 feet. And rather than have you continually trying to find that magic number, you know, I think Jeff's question is a valid one. Is there a number out there, you know, that we all would feel comfortable with?
Well, that wasn't exactly my point. I don't want to be the board of compromising. Basically, us dictating what they should do on their property. I don't think that's our position. We should vote on what's in front of us. I just wanted to see if there's a more firm language saying they need to keep this buffer as proposed with the arborvitae's and the wall and the slope and all that stuff, the mat, intact and maintained for a period of years, or that's where I was going with it. I know we have the arborvitae's for 5 years, but
I'm wondering if it can be, sorry.
Commissioner Volpe, yep, go ahead.
Apologies, I was looking at Commissioner Gord. I wonder if that language, because I do agree and I hear what my fellow commissioners are saying. I do think that this has now, you know, we've talked about it. It's come before us. I do think the wall is a good way, as Sue mentioned, as Commissioner Locks mentioned before, to ensure that there is more privacy on this property. But I also hear Commissioner Wolowski in that, you know, how close could that actually be? So I agree with Commissioner Gork that firming up our language on this issue would ensure that we are making a decision that lasts for this property and the protection of the future property owners in the residential zone.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Salka.
My only comment on this is, you know, to Commissioner Gore, comment is that I don't think we should be necessarily negotiating and talking about changing our regulations at a meeting like this. This is something that needs to be thought through. Looking at this particular application perhaps as a guidepost, but I don't think we should be talking about modifying our regulations here at a meeting like this. This is not the appropriate forum for it. So with that said, I kind of agree with where you're at. 50 feet is 50 feet. If 3 months from now, we want to look at our regulations and perhaps, to Commissioner Gork, change the language, then we should do that, but not at a meeting like this. This is sort of give and take, and that's not where, in the way you change regulations in my mind.
Okay. Any further discussion from the commission members? So we have a motion in front of us to approve the application. It's made and seconded. Seeing no further discussion.
I just had a
Jeff
quick question for
Quirk has
Dave.
a
Is there,
comment.
can we stipulate a maintenance period beyond just the arborvitae trees?
Well, through the chair, the site plan is the plan of record, and what's shown on it has to be maintained the way it is.
Okay.
In terms of buffers or structures or what have you, unless they modify the site plan. It's the
And
plan
I
of
think,
record.
I think Sue's motion, Jeff, provided
Okay,
for
I
like a
just wanted to
5-year
Be sure.
timeline that it
Yes,
would be checked in on and made sure that it was being maintained.
I just didn't, if it sold in 2 years and then somebody decided to tear down half the wall, then.
So
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if respectfully, if Commissioner Locks would have to modify her motion, but what I had said previously, with the examination of the plantings after 5 years, I would add and replace any compromised trees, just so that is on the
Okay.
record.
That would be
Agreeable to
fine.
that?
Any compromised trees.
Jeff, you agree to that?
re-second, yep.
Okay. So that's a motion before us. Seeing no other discussion, Dave, can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Gork,
Yes.
Commissioner Volpe,
Yes.
Commissioner Wolowski,
No.
Commissioner Locks,
Yes.
Commissioner Santiago,
No.
Vice Chair Salka,
No.
and Chair Hammersley.
Hammersley's a no, motion fails 3-4. So we're back at square one. Do we have a motion on this application?
We don't need to. It's basically denied at that point.
Denied.
Yeah, right.
What kind of a motion?
Do you have to have a motion to that?
Motion didn't.
Okay,
Directed 50 feet.
all right, I'm fine with
Right.
that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, okay.
I thought we had to have a motion to deny.
Nah.
We did, well, no,
Okay,
no.
Okay, okay,
It
so,
was denied.
so as I stated earlier, we're gonna take a five, we'll call it a 10-minute break now. Give everyone a chance to run to the restroom before we take up the remaining items on our agenda. So we'll be back here at 8:35.
Well, meeting is pretty riveting. Oh my goodness. I don't
So now that plan has to be.
It's hot in here. It's well, that's why I wore a jacket, because I
Dropped in here.
it's hot.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah, you could do a light proof fence in, you know,
See like a Chuck
as
maybe.
opposed to.
Oh, yeah.
With the car.
Oh, yeah, we can put 3. It's gotta be listed, you know.
So I don't see anything.
That's what I thought you were saying, but I like it. Okay. I can't see this. Yeah, do something about that.
But we're on it, right, everybody honest, that's what the regulations after the site specific. It's 50 feet across the state,
Yeah.
you know, for reduction and all that stuff, so.
Sure, you get nice.
So we sent you ours count last week. You tore down Valley. We sent you ours count late last week.
The question I forgot to ask was.
I'd leave it up.
Is he still encroaching?
Yeah, just in case Seb has something. I think Seb
What's
might
the
have some.
shape, what shape is the?
I saw him with a flash drive.
So. You go in there with machines and you just start doing it. Back where you want. This thing.
Sometimes you see the
Yeah, like
storage
the
area.
deep, deep.
Trying to
Yeah,
cool it
they're,
out.
yeah, like a situation where they're having mulch. Yeah, I was wondering if.
People wore a
after-
jacket, because
after
it's
that
always
meeting-
cold in here. I don't know
Like
about you guys.
Yeah, because it's all muscle.
going.
Oh, it's, and that's why I didn't like the 12-foot high, because you know some of it's gonna go over the top.
Different approach.
Even when they're digging, but not when they're digging, when they're piling it.
Like the idea of just being honest, it would
It's
have to be several different types of trees. I don't believe it was like 6 foot. It's gonna support the construction.
I didn't think so.
Yeah, there's some trees. I don't want.
Sure, but if they were using
The
it.
thing is,
I'm just gonna read certain sections of regulations.
Right out of
They got right out of there. So
Yeah,
Mike
he's
Murtaugh,
the-
but again,
Oh, they will be anyway.
Yeah.
At least for the
Yeah,
record.
especially for this way and that way.
Yeah.
I mean,
The state.
Right, 'cause you could get.
thinking about this stupid one and you think it out of my life forever.
I think it's a lot, right?
you guys get, it's gonna come up front of you and you're gonna know that you
The thing that bothers me.
make regulations if you want.
I don't know, that's why.
Or is there something in there that says anything that's not municipal is not allowed? But now this is a new 300-page statute that goes into more depth, so.
But isn't
you
there a
have
couple
right
of towns that have already voted?
to put a moratorium on any decisions.
Oh.
Doing
Certain
that,
towns
that
have
means they
done
don't,
that?
yeah, that means they don't allow it
That would be
until
the,
they
that
can
that would be
revisit it.
a good approach versus trying to develop quick regulations versus put a moratorium. 'Cause once the horse is out of the barn,
This book board is just too hard for me. Susan, Sue, it's too hard. Yeah.
yeah, but it doesn't have a dictator up front like you.
Oh.
It's a council. We have a nice guy, you know, he.
I know. Much more,
But I wouldn't bring up the
Yeah.
I wouldn't bring up.
Does make sense for the B. I don't say especially up there.
Take something. Or bring up and it says, oh, we're gonna allow it. wants to stay with separate. So that's, it's complex.
Why is mine like this? Is yours like this? No.
Complicated guy.
You paid a guy?
See how everybody else does, yeah.
I know.
It's nice out there though.
And we still have.
Did you mess with it?
What?
Did you, I can't mess with those because my dad put the fear of God in me. I don't touch the
No,
thermostat.
I'd sit down. I put the air on, exactly 75. So.
I said about the thermostat when I was young. Say that.
I already feel
Now I don't know.
maybe more people to show up.
Oh, please, seriously, I have something. Just want to,
Meat locker in here.
you know?
Kill me. Yours don't go this late.
Every one.
But you cut them off.
It's 2021. That's like, that's, to me, that's the most obscene thing.
That was a tough vote.
Are those your
You don't
kids?
even get to discuss that.
Well, yeah.
My goodness gracious, how cute. We have one cat. His name is Floofin.
You all set?
Yeah.
Sue? Good. Christina, ready?
Always,
You good?
yeah,
You ready?
I'm hot, but.
Right.
Yeah.
You should have seen what it was like when we first got here.
Actually, it's.
I just meant like physically attractive. No, I'm just kidding.
You really just said that.
I couldn't help it.
Oh, then I put a.
What are you looking for?
Trying to get documents up, but they're not.
These documents?
Everybody back?
Yeah, I'm all set. Go ahead.
Okay, let's call the meeting back to order. And we'll move on to item H on the agenda. 8H, proposed zone text amendment to amend section 3-08 Housing Opportunity District, zone amendment 608. This was tabled from our last meeting. Just to recap on what we said at the last meeting, we had our council attorney Smith and Jeremy provide members of the commission with 3 different options on these next 3 parts of our agenda. And then that was shared with members of the commission yesterday evening, I believe, actually. And, you know, it sat with them and we, you know, sort of set the table for whatever action we were going to take up here. So with that, I'm going to read the first part of the language that was provided because it appears and it sort of just lays the table out of what's occurred relative to this piece of property. We have a pretty lengthy, what I refer to it as a preamble, but I'm going to read that just to get it into the record, and then we'll open it up for a motion on the, on item 8H. And so it goes. Whereas the Planning and Zoning Commission met on July 20th, 2021, and made the following findings. Number 1, the applicant is proposing a zone text amendment to amend section 3-08 Housing Opportunity District, HOD Zone Amendment 608, a petition to change zone district from R80 to a Housing Opportunity District for property located at 295 Landing Street, zone change 569, and a site plan application to construct an age-restricted affordable housing development for 30 units under Connecticut General Statute Section 8-30G for property located at 295 Landing Street, SPR 1811. Number 2, the site is located in a residential R80 zoned area with proposed residential dwellings on Landing Street with Interstate 84 to the north, Doral Lane to the east, Aspen Way to the south, and Queen Street to the west. Number 3, the applicant has submitted a site plan proposal with the following elements: 15 buildings, of which contains 2 residential units for a total of 30 dwelling units. 9 of the units will be affordable dwelling units. Parking spaces are provided in the front of each building. 1 main means of ingress and egress is shown on Landing Street, and an entrance on Landing Oaks contains a boulevard feature with a median. An emergency access within the easement over private property is shown going through the adjacent Baptist Church parking lot and onto Landing Street. Septic systems for each of the 13 duplex buildings on site. Item number 4, the submitted proposal includes a traffic generation analysis, site plan, sedimentation and erosion control plan, and an affordability plan. Number 5, the applicant has taken a position that except for section 3-08, if amended as a result of, as requested, all other Southington zoning regulations are not applicable, and thus the proposed plans are not required to comply with the elements of permitted developments within the residential R80 zoning district. Number 6, the 295 Landing Street application materials, together with further information required during from the applicant and his professional consultants during the public hearing, and further information acquired from experts and staff under the commission's employ and/or direction, the testimony of the public contains sufficient information necessary for a fair collective determination of the issues. Item number 7, the commission finds that the applications to change the zoning map for the subject property for R80 to HOD and site plans are unified and integrated and apply specifically to the subject property. The text amendment, however, does not. Number 8, the commission collectively finds that that Southington has a documented need for affordable housing 5.54% of Southington's housing qualifies as affordable according to the state of Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development's 2020 Affordable Housing Appeals Procedure List. Since Southington does not have the state required 10% affordable housing, it is subject to section 8-30G of the Connecticut General Statutes. Number 9, throughout the public hearing, the commission has expressly recognized that there is a need for affordable housing in Southington as defined by section 8-30G. Number 10, the applicant submitted the affordability plan pursuant to section 8-30G, identifying 50% of the dwelling units or 5 units will be affordable and will be afforded to families whose income is less than or equal to 60% of the area or statewide median incomes, whichever is less, and 15% of the dwelling units or 4 units will be afforded and will be affordable and will be offered to families whose income is less than or equal to 80% of the area or statewide median incomes, whichever is less. Number 11, the affordability plan describes the rental amounts and they appear to be consistent with 8-30G's requirements. Number 12, the project is considered an affordable housing set-aside development, which means it is in a development where not less than 30% of the dwelling units will be conveyed by deed containing covenants or restrictions which shall require that for at least 40 years after the initial occupation of the development, such dwelling units will be sold or rented at or below prices which are 30% or less of their annual income, where such income is less than or equal to 80% of the state or area median income, whichever is less. According to the 2019 figures, the state's median income is $104,000 and the area median income is $97,000. Therefore, the area median income would be used for these purposes. Of the 30% affordable units, at least 15% of the dwelling units shall be sold or rented to families whose income is less than or equal to 60% of the area median income, adjusted for family size. The remainder of the dwelling units shall be sold or rented to families whose income is less than 80% of the area median income, adjusted for family size. Number 13, a public hearing was held on the dates indicated above to receive comments from the applicant, the public, and the town staff. And just as reference, the hearing was held on April 20th, 2021, May 4th, 2021, May 18th, 2021, June 1, 2021, and June 15th, 2021. So with that, I will open up agenda item 8H for discussion and a motion.
Mr. Chairman, therefore, I let it resolve that the proposed modification that would only require one means of egress and ingress to and from the site of the HOD property, district property for vehicle traffic, is inadequate and unsafe, both from a public safety and for a fire suppression, especially for a 55 and older age-restricted community. The requested amendment for the HOD zone to allow development of 10 acres or more in the HOD zone with only one means of access is neither appropriate nor acceptable. The proposed modifications will allow private septic systems as developed for 10 acres or more is not supported by the record, and the necessity for it to be allowed in the HOD zone has not been justified. The utilization of the private septic system is inadequate and poses a threat to the public health and safety to the proposed residents, as well as to the adjacent landowners and the nearby property residents to this environment. Therefore, Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we deny ZA 608.
So we have a motion to deny zone amendment 608. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a second from Commissioner Santago. Any discussion? Any discussion?
I think first, I'd like to thank council for all your work on that and giving us options to do for this. I know it's incredibly difficult to do that, and I certainly appreciate both your guidance through all of this. So just an appreciation for all that you do. This was not certainly a simple thing to go through and is certainly, we heard a lot of testimony and all that. So for both of you to add clarity for us is certainly appreciated.
Thanks, Peter. Commissioner Ward?
I'd just like to, since this is a general, our discussion of this, talking about the ingress and egress and then the septic systems. What specifically about the septic systems did not seem to fit? Well, did members take issue with, I guess?
Commissioner Salke, you want to answer that, or you wanted the record to reflect your
I mean, yeah,
response?
it's been a lot of meetings and we've discussed quite a bit. I was just wondering.
Well, in that particular zone, being it was an R80, and when you think back about that particular zone and why it was denied initially, was because there was no septic system running up to that property.
No sewer.
And just because we're changing a zone does not necessarily necessitate saying that, okay, now all of a sudden the septic systems are allowed. So, I mean, that's the reason for my comment in this particular application, or, you know,
So it's just a general concern of the amount of septic systems that would
Yes.
be installed and the
Yep.
neighboring septic systems, and the testimony we've heard from them saying that they've had some issues with their systems and this may cause
Correct.
more.
yes.
Well, and I think the language of what Commissioner Salka read into the record, and that is, again, the proposed modifications to allow private septic systems on developments of 10 acres or more is not supported by the record, and the necessity for it to be allowed in a HOD zone has not been justified. The utilization of private septic systems is inadequate and poses a threat to the public safety and health of the proposed residents, as well as the adjacent property owners and neighbor residents, and to the environment. I think that sort of speaks to itself.
So there was no data in the soil pits that they dug that said that they couldn't hold all these septic systems, was there? In the data that the applicant provided in the soil data? Dave, do you?
I believe it was, and I'm just coming into this speaking
Yes.
for, what I've seen of the record is the health director reserves the right to kick it to state for review.
Yes, I saw that email. I printed that out because I was that was gonna be my other question was, have we gone that avenue, or is anybody asked to kick it up from the local health department to the state, or?
No, that would be premature at this point, because I think that the application has to be approved by the local planning and zoning commission before the state or the local health department take a further look at that.
And I guess just stating my positions here, or my thoughts on where we're heading down this path. The egress and ingress, the entrance and exit, the two roads, our current regulation says 25 units. Do we know where that number 25 came from? Besides that, it's in our regulations?
My suggestion, Commissioner Gork, is that was facilitated through some discussion at some point in previous. It precludes me from being involved here, but my guess, based on the conversation, is that it probably was a recommendation or a suggestion that was made by our fire department as well as our police department.
Okay, because I just went down a rabbit hole of codes this afternoon, fire codes and the CT Fire Safety Code, the CT Fire State Fire Prevention Code, CGS 29, a bunch of avenues that I shouldn't have went down, because then you just get, I don't know, overwhelmed. And I came across an international fire code that I don't know if the state follows this, because I couldn't find anything in the state fire codes that say number of units for residential, and an international one had the number at 30. It said developments of one or two family dwellings where the number of dwelling units exceeds 30 shall be provided with two separate and approved fire apparatus access roads. So I was wondering, well, how did we get to 25? And this was just from the 2021 International Fire Code. So I don't know if the state goes by it. So that was just my question. Where did we get 25? So, and we have it. So that's what we're going with.
I'm just
So-
taking a guess, so I
All right.
don't really know the answer to your question. I don't know if anyone else has anything they want to speculate on the answer to that.
I don't know, maybe an applicant came before and that's why we got 25 because they requested 25. So I didn't know if there was any hard evidence on why we had
Yeah.
25 units.
Long before my time.
Yeah. All right, that was it. That was my discussion.
Any further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, Dave, can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Rourke,
Motion is to deny, correct?
Yes.
No.
Commissioner Volpe,
Commissioner Volpe, yes.
Commissioner Wulowski,
Yes.
Commissioner Locks,
No,
Commissioner Santiago,
Yes.
Vice Chair Salka,
Yes.
and Chair Hammersley.
Hammersley's a yes, motion passes 7-2. Or I'm sorry, 5-2. Thank you. Item 8I, petition of Brian F. Macarello Esquire to change zone district from an R80 to a Housing Opportunity District, HOD, property located at 295 Landing Street, parcel size 11.21 acres, zone change number 569. This was tabled for our meeting on June 15th. Is there any discussion or a motion on this petition?
Mr. Chairman, based on the public health and safety reasons cited in denying ZA 608, the requested change for R80 to the HOD zone must be denied because the parcel is less than 30 acres.
So we have a motion from Commissioner Salka. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Santiago with a second. Any discussion from members of the commission on this? Seeing none, Dave, can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Rourke,
What was the motion again, sir? That was
to deny the
Yes.
zone change.
motion, yes.
Commissioner Volpe,
Commissioner Volpe, yes.
Commissioner Wulowski,
Yes.
Commissioner Locks,
yes,
Commissioner Santiago,
Yes.
Vice Chair Salka,
Yes.
Chair Hammersley.
Hammersley's a yes. Motion passes 7-0. Moving on to item 8J, site plan application of Frank and Mary Fragola to construct an age-restricted affordable housing development for 30 units under Connecticut General Statute, Section 8-30G, property located at 295 Landing Street. This is special permit application number 1811, tabled from June 15th. Do we have any discussion or a motion from members of the commission?
I'd like to ask a question first
Sure, Santiago, go ahead.
to council. So Attorney Smith, you had educated us on procedure regarding an 830G application in regards to if a site plan is modified or denied or something is amiss to that, and the applicant can still come back within X period of time with changes or other. Can you go over that one more time, please?
Yes, Brian Smith, Special Counsel to the Southern Planning and Zoning Commission. The Affordable Housing Statute 830G, which we're referencing, specifically provides, I believe it's in section H, that if the commission either modifies or denies an application or any application of affordable housing, the applicant has two choices. If they don't like the conditions of approval or they don't like the denial, they can either go within the normal statutory time period of 15 days after notice to the Superior Court, or within that same time period, they can come back to the commission if they believe they have guidance from the commission about their concerns and resubmit an application, modified application to the commission. Commission has 45, or used to at least before COVID, I don't know what it is now, but used to have 45 days within which to act on that resubmission. That's allowed for all affordable housing.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you for that clarification.
So before we get a motion on this, I just want to read into the record a couple items. One, relative to fire safety findings. Based upon the evidence and testimony presented to it, the commission finds that there is a substantial public interest in the preservation of life and property by minimizing the threat from fire and similar catastrophes. B, the commission further finds that the need to protect the lives and property of the residents of the town of Southington and the requirement to provide adequate means to accomplish such need clearly outweighs the need for affordable housing. with limited means of ingress and egress. Should the main entrance be obstructed, it would be difficult to take too much time for effective fire department response, especially for an over 55 or older restricted community. Public safety findings, the record contains substantial evidence that the specific location of the affordable housing development and the density could have a catastrophic adverse impact on the vehicular traffic and pedestrians in the development and the surrounding area. The risk of increased traffic, especially in consideration of the significant existing adverse traffic conditions at the intersection of Queen Street and Landing Road, I think it's street, associated with the proposed density would far surpass the limit value of the affordable housing. B, the proposed private septic system design is inadequate and poses a threat to the public health and safety of the proposed residents and to the adjacent landowners and neighboring residents. And C, the secondary emergency access through the adjacent Baptist church parking lot was offered as a theoretical alternative, as no independent, credible, or evidence or testimony was offered to indicate that the Baptist church had agreed to such an arrangement. Moreover, based on the sketch presented to the commission by the applicant, the emergency access route between two of the buildings is too narrow and unsafe. Do we have any further discussion on item 8J, and do we have a motion on that item?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to deny site plan SPR 1811.
We have a motion from Commissioner Salka. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Santago with a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, Dave, can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Agoric,
Yes.
Commissioner Volpe,
Yes.
Commissioner Olowski,
Yes.
Commissioner Locke,
Yes.
Commissioner Santago,
Yes.
Vice Chair Salka,
Yes.
Chair Hammersley.
Hammersley is a yes. Motion passes 7-0. Moving on to item 8K, request for the release of a 16,000 public improvement bond, AutoZone 1776 Meriden Waterbury Turnpike. This was special permit application number 1793. Dave, do we have anything you want to add to this?
I believe all the requested bond releases are ready for action.
We do have a memo from Jim Capone that says exactly what you just said. So that's part of the record. So thanks, Dave. Is there any discussion on this?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve SPR 1793.
We have a motion from Commissioner Salka. Do we have a second?
Second.
Wolowski with a second. Get you next time, Sue. We could just do a voice vote on these, Dave. Yeah, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No,
Oh,
it was.
Okay, motion passes. Item 8L, request for release of a 8,600 erosion and sediment bond, AutoZone 1776 Meriden Waterbury Turnpike SPR 1793. This looks like a repeat.
I'm just gonna say that. Is
It's a-
that
it's
the
a
right
different-
number,
It's a
Dave?
different number.
There,
It's the
the
same,
bond
it's the
amounts are
same,
different.
same permit
Okay.
number, yeah.
Okay. Mr. Chair, make a motion to approve SPR 1793 for item L on the agenda.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second from Commissioner Locke.
We're gonna
Any
fight over
discussion? See none, all those in favor say aye.
this. Aye.
Aye, any opposed? Motion passes. Item 8,
Mr. Chair?
Yep.
Could we dismiss
oh yeah, I'm sorry.
special counsel?
Actually, Commissioner Taylor, I might want you to sit with us, or Attorney Taylor, I'm sorry.
It's 9 o'clock.
I'm not leaving.
Oh,
Just gonna
no.
dismiss the
Yeah,
special
okay, I
counsel
thought you
and thank him
said
for
please.
his help.
Yeah,
Yeah, well,
thanks for your help, Brian.
Thank
Uh,
you. Thank you, Attorney.
Thank you. It was an honor to serve with all of you. So
Thank you, sir.
We'll see you in the future probably, but, item 8M, request for release of a $2,800 erosion and sediment bond, Southington Country Club Incorporated, S1225. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair, make a motion, we approve S1225.
A motion for Commissioner Salka. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Santago. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Item 8N, request for release of a $1,000 public improvement bond, Southington Country Club Incorporated, S1225. Do we have a motion?
Make a motion to approve S1225.
Motion for Commissioner Salkin. Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Wolowski with a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Item 8O, request for release of a $6,500 erosion and sediment bond, Southington Country Club, Phase 1, S1251. Do we have a motion?
Make a motion to approve S1251.
We have a motion for Commissioner Salkin. Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Santiago with a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Moving on to administrative items. So Public Act 21-29, this deals with the zoning bill that was passed by the General Assembly earlier this year. I did send some information out that I got from, I think, Dave, that you got from the Naugatuck Valley Council of Governments. I shared that. Right now, as we all know, we lack a full-time planner. And I think that we're probably better off waiting to go down this path of looking at this until we get that person on board, so that we can look at it in a more holistic way and probably more valuable to all of us is having that person participate or at least give us their input as a professional on this matter. So it will remain a standing item until we have that person here and they've had time to find their way to the restrooms in the building and gotten comfortable a little bit with the way things go. So just be on the lookout, as I've said in the past.
Are we bound by any time frame, Mr. Chair, on this?
I think there's a time frame on it. I want to say it's October-ish. But let me look into that a little bit further. We have time,
Okay.
if that's what your question
Yeah,
is. So I'm
yeah,
not
yeah.
concerned about that, but in any event, so moving on to item number 10. Standing of current regs and opt-out for retail sale of recreational marijuana, discussion of a potential opt-out as it relates to land use only. So Jeremy, just weigh in here a little bit on this. So as everybody, I think, knows, the town council last week adopted a request of the Planning and Zoning Commission to start thinking about regulations on the sale of recreational marijuana per the passage of Public Act 21-1. And so that's how that appears on our agenda. And Jeremy, I don't know if you want to add anything to what the town council did on that?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just briefly, as you may have heard or know by now, that Senate Bill 1201 regarding recreational marijuana was passed, and it's just roughly over 300 pages. So I don't know if you got a chance to read through all of it yet. But I could tell you myself and other municipal attorneys have been going through and trying to interpret and decipher it for some time now. But what I'm going to do for you right now is just cherry pick some of the bill that deals with zoning regulations and what it allows you to do as a board. So I'm going to read right from this bill so that I make sure it's accurate for you. So just bear with me. I'm going to be brief.
Go ahead.
But this bill allows municipalities to amend their zoning regulations or local ordinances to take the following actions regarding cannabis establishments. A, prohibit them from opening. B, reasonably restrict their hours and signage. Or C, restrict their proximity to religious institutions, schools, charitable institutions, hospitals, veterans' homes, or certain military establishments. If you take any of this action, the municipal chief zoning officials are required to report these zoning changes to the OPM secretary and the DCP within 14 days after adopting this change. Existing law allows municipalities to regulate activities deemed harmful to public health, including tobacco smoking on municipally owned property. This bill broadens this to include property that a municipality controls but does not own. For the purposes of this section, property that a municipality controls includes, but not limited to, sidewalks, parks, beaches, municipal land and buildings, etc. It specifies that this regulatory authority applies to smoked or vaped tobacco or cannabis or other types of cannabis use or consumption. To so briefly summarize that, if the town does have current laws that regulate where you can not smoke on, let's say, public parks or anything like that, then this cannabis regulation can be incorporated with those existing bans that a municipality may have.
Okay. Thanks, Attorney Taylor. And as everybody knows, we're charged by Connecticut General Statute, Section 8, to set land use policy in our town. We're elected for that purpose. So I just wanted to get a flavor of where the sense of the commission is so that we can utilize that and have town staff to begin to develop any potential regulation. I think before we sort of open up the floor a little bit, I want to have Commissioner Santago talk about an effort that he undertook about 2.5 years ago or so, wherein we revised our medical marijuana regulations with the currently.
Didn't know where you're going with that.
So I think it's section 11-23 of our
Yeah.
regulations deal with
Yeah.
medical marijuana. So Peter
Yeah.
headed up a subcommittee on that. So Peter, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So we had some existing language in our regulations regarding medical marijuana, which I think it was myself, Jen Clock at the time, and I think Kelly Lepard of Steps, and I might have been one more, so my memory isn't helping me. So I apologize if there was somebody else there. And so we looked to be consistent across the board with medical marijuana in regards to the dispensary as well as for producers. And with that, we set what I think is some pretty good guidance in regards to separation, some of the things that, Jeremy, you were talking about in terms of can it be near certain things? Because what we have found was the language was inconsistent across both a medical marijuana dispensary and a producer. And so we look to make that language consistent across the board and firm up where such a facility could go. Also I believe at that time, we had said that the medical marijuana, and we said as those of us who were here, I thought we had some very compelling testimony from people who benefit from it. And we heard what I thought was probably one of the best applications that I've seen in all my time here when we approved the medical marijuana dispensary over on Nata Road. If anybody wants to judge how to come before us and present, get a copy of that because that applicant was fantastic. And I think Bob, you were here. I thought they did a great job. But with that, I think we had also said that a medical marijuana facility should remain as such and not be recreational. And I think because it was seen as a pharmacy, it was seen as a medical establishment. And in hearing how it is operated as such and hearing the very compelling testimony from people who benefit from that, I think we held to that. And I certainly will not want to see it change. And I think, Jeremy, in the law, if I'm not mistaken, I think the law that was passed would provide for a hybrid approach, if I'm not mistaken. And from my standpoint, we could verify that, certainly. From my standpoint, I don't think I personally would want that to happen because I personally would want a medical facility to stay as such, mainly out of deference to the people who are going there seeking treatment. And so for me, I would want to keep that language that we have there. I also think since we're talking about direction for staff, I think, and Jeremy, you had talked to us about like use or whatever, where things could happen and the like. Does it have to be all in one section or can it be throughout? Because as I understand it, if we were to do nothing, something becomes a special permit, it can go wherever a special permit can go. Or can we say the like use is like medical marijuana and we could have language in regards to the separation that's there because it's like that. So I'm curious. So
That, I'll let you finish that.
yeah. So when we finished our medical marijuana, we also had pretty deep discussions for those of us here that were like, look, we're all in favor of, I don't want to say it was a unanimous vote, but it was pretty darn close. So I don't know if it was 7-1 or 7-0. I forget how that was, Sue, but my memory serves those, but it was pretty close. we had said we had zero issue with the medical thing after hearing very compelling testimony from people who benefit from it. And indeed, I think steps even came in approval for what we had set aside at the final thing. They were with that. But we also said that we weren't in favor of recreational, that we were indeed. So we had a lot of discussions we may be having in the coming days, kind of already during that discussion here, saying, you know what? Medicals is actually fine. And there was a lot of people saying, don't do it. But in hearing the testimony of people with MS or in extreme pain, I just remember one young man who had a back thing who's in extreme pain. It was, your heart goes out to those folks who benefit from it. And the commission ultimately said, we're doing a disservice to those folks. And it was ultimately approved because it was a pharmacy. But the use of recreational, we had said at the time, we're really not in favor of that. And so we put the language to say at the time, don't confuse the two. So I guess the question in regards to like use and the like, since I brought up the language that we already have in there for medical marijuana, how would that play with us if we're kind of talking about language?
The bill says, which is very interesting, that if you do not make any regulations or decide not to act on this, then you'd have to take any permit or any application, that's submitted and consider it as anything that you would for a like use. And that's the keyword, like use. And the bill actually is interpreted to say, we're putting on the onus on each municipality's planning and zoning commission to decide what a like use is. And obviously that's something that they didn't want to take up at this point. So they put it on each municipality to decide what is a like use. Whether it's, do you treat this like an alcohol, a liquor establishment? What do you treat it as? So that's something that you guys are going to be tasked with.
And that
Try to interpret.
decision has to be consistent if there's more than one, right?
I would
One-
say,
one would think.
I would say so.
So based on the current law, when could someone come into us and say, I want to open a recreational marijuana place? Is it like, could someone walk into Dave's office tomorrow?
I don't have the date, but I believe it's not until, I don't want to misspeak on this, but it's not currently right now.
So it's not, because the reason I ask is some municipalities, and I'll stop talking, and let everybody else. Some municipalities have said we should have a moratorium until X period of time to figure things out. And I wondered if that was to firm up their language. And I thought it would be something because they didn't want somebody to walk into the office tomorrow without them knowing fully how to cover that. So I don't know what your view on that particular thing is, because I think Thomas did that. And I thought Waterbury was talking about moratorium type things to give them time to do other stuff.
Correct. That's something that you can wait until you act on. Right now, you're just having the discussions on what you want to do. Obviously, we're waiting that the town, I believe there's an effort to have a referendum go on right now.
Right.
So a lot of towns are just doing the wait and see approach. So
Term, I guess, buy you anything? If the date is next year, sake argument, the date's next year, does the moratorium buy you something because they can't come till next year? Or what does that do officially? Does it stop everything and just everybody take a breath? Or legally, what does that do?
basically, it gives you a little more time to kick the can down the road. But I would definitely want to talk to some other municipal attorneys that actually have done that and see what their intent was behind it.
Okay. All right, I'm done talking.
Mr. Chairman, just,
Commissioner Salker, go ahead.
if we look at our current regulations to what Pete was talking about, on 1123, Section A, or I guess, Section A, it says further, this section shall not permit any retail and/or wholesale marijuana products not considered to be medical marijuana as regulated under Chapter 420F. And I'm just wondering how strong that is, because to your point, my concern is what happened with VIP. We had VIP, there was a groundswell of people that were against the VIP application that came in. But before we did anything, the application hit planning and zoning. We put a moratorium on it and we wrote the regulations, but the horse was already out of the barn. And now we have an adult facility, if, whatever you want to call it, adult store,
Store.
in Southington. And that's what I do not want to happen here, in Southington before we can get our regulation. Now, whether it's a moratorium or whether it's, we bite the bullet, we put something together, may not be great, but it can stop an application coming in until we can flush it out. Because I don't want the same thing to happen that happened at VIP, where the application came in, we had, you know, it met our regulations at the time, we had to approve it, and we stopped them from then on, but that's it. I don't want that to happen with this.
So,
Because, you know, the bottom line is, the state of Connecticut, the towns have spent millions and millions of dollars with STEPS, with DARE, with all of their programs about, you know, smoking cessation, Alcohol Anonymous, gambling addiction. And then we pass a regulation to allow another drug. In my mind, is nothing more than a money grab. But, you know, the bottom line is that, you know, we just need to, I think we need to move fairly quickly, in my mind, before an application comes before us and then we're caught between a rock and a hard place. I don't want that to happen.
Mr. Chair, I have some comments as well.
go ahead, Commissioner Volpe.
This is Commissioner Volpe here. I hear everything that my fellow commissioners are saying. I certainly hear your apprehensions, but I would like to make 2 points. The first is that we are often applauding small business owners that come before us. We have a unique opportunity here to build upon our small business sector with some responsible regulations in additions to or subtractions thereof of what we currently have. You know, in relation to all of the other wonderful things, restaurants and countless, if we're going to allow the most vulnerable members of our town, patients with medical conditions, to consume marijuana, and the state law has now regulated that you can use it recreationally, I don't really see how we can divorce those 2 things at this point and move forward saying that while our most vulnerable in society may have it, we don't believe it will create a playground. And to further that point, from a personal standpoint, since we have mentioned such things, I graduated Southington High School in 2009. And since then have lost nearly over 10 members of my graduating class because of an opioid crisis. So if we want to talk about the dangers of marijuana, we need to frame it within the standpoint of that because it's much more concerning in our town. I believe that if we do decide to either form a subcommittee for the regulations, look into it further, we should definitely take our time to consider this. However, if you have, and I'm not saying I have because I won't implicate myself, gone to Massachusetts and visited a legal dispensary, it is not just like a fun for all. It's not like Count Pounce. You don't go in there and ride every ride. You have to go through security checkpoints, similar things that have been implied with the Connecticut state law. So again, from a land use standpoint, there are certain areas in our town, such as near our school, near this building, near religious centers, that should not be allowed to have such places, just as a liquor store and a guy who drunkenly ran into the fence of the one down the street from me the other day did. You know, the worst that could happen is we might need another lane in the drive-through of McDonald's, and we can come to that when we get there. But certainly, if we are going to say that it is safe for vulnerable members of our society, let's be responsible because either way, drugs come into our town. And I would rather be responsible and have regulations that support where they may be and how they are allowed to be consumed in that sense than say not at all and have it still be here because it's here no matter what. Thank you so much. Sorry for my anecdotes, like McDonald's.
Okay, thanks, Commissioner Volpe.
No problem.
Any other member of the commission have anything they want to add to this
I do have
conversation?
one question.
Commissioner Locke, go
As
ahead.
far as the referendum, if
Yep.
it did get to
Yeah.
that far, how many signatures or whatever is needed to bring it to referendum?
It's 10% of the registered voters in the town. I think in our town, it's a little over 3,000 signatures.
Okay,
I want, you know, for some reason, 3,200 sticks in my head, but don't quote me on that number, but that's a ballpark
And the
of what.
way-
Yeah, it's about 3,100 and change.
Yeah,
It's 10% of the registered
and they
voters.
have,
when they
yeah,
see a
50,
certain group out there, they're gonna get that.
okay. And they have 60 days, just to clarify that, so they have 60 days prior to the election, or prior to the election, which is November 6th or whatever it is,
Okay.
to submit that to the town clerk to be verified, and then assuming that that's all those requirements are met, then it must appear as a referendum on the ballot.
Okay.
And just to clarify, it was asked by the town council, actually by the town clerk, if they can get it in a little bit before that because all of those signatures need to be verified. So,
Right.
but I believe, and I would have to look back at the notes, but I believe they said maybe a week before that 60 days or a week and a half.
And it has to be voters, right?
It has to be registered voters.
Is that right? Yep. So, oh yeah, you gotta verify. So based on it, so Sue, I
Sue,
think.
Sue,
what
were
you-
you finished or, I'm sorry.
Yes, because I somewhat support what Christina has said. I don't think we're going to go and prevent it from being in town. The way people go cross borders, if Meriden allows it to be sold, we're not going to stop it. We need to go and prevent it in areas around schools, the hospitals, every place that is vulnerable to our children, our youth. And in order to go and do this, I think we have to make stricter regulations for that.
You all set?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Peter?
Jeremy, though, to Sue's point, which is a valid point in regards to referendum. So as I understand it, the referendum, if it happens, takes precedent over anything we would do. So if we say we say one way or the other, say we say, you know what? Everything is fine and we make regulations, say, have a nice day. Have it, next to Serafino's. Great. Sorry for Serafino. And the referendum comes in and it says, we don't want it. We have to change our regulations. Or on the other side, if we come in and say, I don't want it at all, and the referendum overwhelmingly says Sunnyton approves it. Take us through, no, so I wanted to give both sides of it.
Right.
Yes and no, that's why I said.
So the referendum would take precedent. It's now in the voters' hands. It would go into, as a referendum item on the November 2nd, I believe, election. And whatever is decided there, you would have to go back and revisit your regulations if you made regulations contrary to that.
Gotcha. So for us then, is it wise for us to have action? Is it wise for us to draft both kinds of language? Meaning, you could draft, like, language to deny is easy. It's like, nope. Language to approve, however, is kind of what the discussion is around in regards to what does like use mean? What does separation mean? What does hours of operation? What does all that mean? Because if we're given direction for anything, then should we give direction on both sides to draft language? Take one side, take action, do nothing? So like where should we go? Because if we do anything, it could be fine come November, assuming a referendum happens. That's a big assumption. But otherwise, it could get, redone, but at least we could have something ready in case one vote goes one way versus the other.
Mr. Chairman?
Well, I'm here to give you legal advice, so I don't really want to tell you what you guys should do or wouldn't do, but I think it is beneficial that you're having a discussion about it so that you are prepared one way or the other, whatever happens with the referendum, or if the referendum doesn't become an item.
Right.
So I think it's good to have discussion. I can't tell you whether you should be making action on it or not.
Commissioner Gore.
I don't know if the board would want to do this, but do we have the power as a board to put it to referendum and say we want the voters to decide, not us?
I don't believe that we have that power to do that. And quite frankly, Jeff, my position is that we were
Voted
elected
in,
to
yeah.
fulfill our obligations, and our obligations are clearly outlined in Section 8 of the general statutes, which gives us power to set regulations for our municipality. And if we're going to take every difficult decision and send it out to voters, I think we're kind of shirking our responsibility. And to that point, then what use would a planning and zoning commission
I
be?
agree. Yeah, I agree with you. I just didn't know if we had that power, because I was gonna say if we did and that's the direction the board wanted to do, we could just put a moratorium on everything until it was decided by referendum. Or we could just pass a moratorium and kick it down the road until the board comes up with, the subcommittee comes up with plans to implement it. That would be my thought process, just
Okay.
put everything on hold until the board can come up with something.
Okay. Commissioner Salka?
My only comment, and it's really in support of what the chairman just said, is that we're an elected board. And I think that it's important for an elected board, whether it be the town council or the planning and zoning, is to set an example of what the direction that we feel is critical to the town. We write regulations for the town, for, you know, all the voters and the people living in Southington. And I think it's, since we are an elected board, not an appointed board, that we should set the tone of whatever the tone is. So what the voters know where perhaps we stand, and not write regulations either way, be wishy-washy about it. We should write regulations and/or put a moratorium on it and saying, this board, this is the direction that this board feels is important to the town of Southington as elected officials. Those are my comments. I think it supports what you said, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Commissioner Volpe, second time, go ahead.
Sorry, Commissioner Volpe here. Mr. Chair, just to agree with Commissioner Salka, I do think that as a representative body, we do have a responsibility to at least either form a subcommittee or take more time with this decision to understand what our constituents want of us, since we are representative of them, and to also discover more about this issue since it is so new to the entire state of Connecticut, right? I also think, as Commissioner Santago was saying, we could draft going either way, but wouldn't it be more responsible to already kind of think of ways that we could regulate, right? As I said before, it's going to be in our town regardless. So we either, I'm a mother, so from a parenting standpoint, I'm either going to take control of the situation or allow it to unfurl the way it will. I think it would be responsible of this commission to form a subcommittee to discuss this further and to look into the research and the opinions of our constituents. That's it.
Okay. Commissioner Wolowski?
Just to make a few comments. I get, it's been in our town since my mother was a mother. It's always been here. It was a close vote statewide. It's been a close vote nationally. I think having the discussion, keeping it open, it's going to be close regardless of what we decide. There's numerous opinions and perspectives, and I don't think it's going to be a slam dunk either way, just based on what I'm seeing at this table. So the discussion needs to be had, and open for it.
Yeah. So I kind of come at it with a couple different thoughts. One is that, the effort to have a referendum is provided for in the legislation, and that's a prerogative of the citizens to gather enough signatures, submit those to the town clerk, have those be verified. The success of that or not really isn't something that we need to be concerned with at this time. We have an obligation as a Planning and Zoning Commission, as provided to us, as thrust upon us, I guess I would say, by the Connecticut general statutes and by the voters of this town. Most of us up here were elected to fulfill that obligation, I being one of those. And I have no intention of waiting around until November before we make a decision about what we want to do. And it is our prerogative, and that too is outlined in the legislation. It is our prerogative, nay, our responsibility to make a decision for the people in our town as elected members about whether we want to provide for this type of business or not. We regulate businesses all the time. Look at our regulations. You see it throughout. Bob Salka brought up one of them. We regulate that business. We regulate the medical marijuana business. Section 11-23, which again, we modified with an effective date, I'm looking at it right now, of February 20th, 2019. That was 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago. We regulated that. And to that point, Commissioner Volpe, you bring up vulnerable members of our society. I hear you. I get it. I sat through those hearings along with Peter Santago and Sue Locks when we had people who came up to us and talked to us about the need and their need to take marijuana for medical conditions, which were regulated by the Department of Consumer Protection in the state of Connecticut, right? And In 2012, this commission, before I was on it, I think Sue might have been on it at the time, this commission took a proactive approach and adopted medical marijuana regulations. It wasn't even allowed in the state of Connecticut. It wasn't legal in the state of Connecticut. It wasn't legal in any state in the United States at that time. But we were being proactive about it. And what we did is we sat down, and I think in a very good move, we sat down and we developed regulations. In 2018, 2019, we saw 2 applications that came before our commission, heel to toe, one right after the other, that sought to put dispensaries for medical marijuana in our town. And it forced us all, new people like me and Peter and other people that were involved, to look at our regulations and to say, hey, what do we allow here and where do we allow it? And from that, after those applications were done, we formed a subcommittee to look at our regulations and to come back with recommendations for us to either modify or maybe just not do anything with our regulations at that time. Again, in February of 2019, we received that report and we did modify our regulations. As Bob Solka pointed out, again, trying to be proactive because recreational marijuana at that time was not legal in the state of Connecticut, although medical marijuana was legal, trying to be proactive. That one sentence that Bob read off, again, I'll read it because it's important. It says, further, this section shall not permit any retailer and or wholesaler of marijuana products not considered medical marijuana as regulated under Chapter 420F of the Connecticut General Statutes. What that says is that in the event that recreational marijuana is legalized in the state of Connecticut, that we as a commission in 2019, we took a position that said, we don't want those dispensaries in our town. What happens in other towns, in towns like Waterbury or Meriden or Stonington, that's not our purview. Our purview is the town of Southington. That's what we're elected by the people of the town of Southington to fulfill that role, and that's what we have an obligation to do. I don't want to wait until November to find out whatever the outcome of that referendum may be, assuming the referendum moves forward. I think that we are called to action to take a position at some point and to guide staff to put a regulation, a proposed draft regulation in front of us for us to consider as an elected body, being a responsible body for those land use decisions. If the moratorium comes or the referendum goes a different direction, then we always have the opportunity to revisit it at that time. If we decide 3 years from now that we want to or we don't want to allow for recreational marijuana to be in our town, if we permit it to, under this proposed regulation at some point in the near future, we can always come back and change it. We change regulations. We just had a conversation about changing a regulation tonight because it was relative to an application that we had. Now, I agree with Commissioner Salka. That's not the proper way to change a regulation, but we all have been here long enough to know that we've changed regulations in the past because we saw that those regulations weren't necessarily ones that suited us. I'll speak about one that I worked on, signs. I worked on making sure that our sign regulations were consistent and considerate and not to pollute our roadways and byways and towns with hodgepodge of different designs and makeups and setbacks and locations. And, people would ask me, what are you looking to prevent? And I would show them a picture and I would say, I want to prevent this because I didn't want that. And I'm an elected member. I have the right to do that. I went and did my work. I presented it in front of this commission. The commission ended up adopting it. You're working on one for food trucks right now. We have other people who are working on ones to revise our regulations, just wholesale wise. We get applications. I think we have an application coming before us to make another zone change. Christina, 2 meetings ago, we had a zone change on a zone change that we did 2 years ago to change it back to the zone that we changed it from. And what did we do? We didn't form a subcommittee and go out and look at it. We didn't do any of that. What we did is we took action based on, our responsibilities as elected members. Each of us 7 members of this commission, each of us had a single vote and we decided what we wanted to do. And what we ended up doing was changing that back from a decision that we had made 2 years prior. And you sat there and you said, Commissioner Volpe, you said to all of us, I saw this coming and I'm glad that it's before us again and we took action. I don't think we need to wait But I think that we need to give staff some direction in terms of whether we're supporting, as a group, whether we support the sale of recreational marijuana in our town, or whether we don't support that. And I think that that's a fair thing to do. For us to wait, for us to sit there and wring our hands and pontificate about whether we want it or not, is candidly irresponsible and just is in violation of the oath that we took to fulfill the obligations that we have both under the Connecticut general statutes and the charter of the town of Southington. So, you know, that's kind of my position. I think everybody's had a chance to talk about it. Caleb, I don't know if you want to add anything to this, but I'm trying to get a sense of where we are so that we can give our town staff some direction and possibly take this up at our next meeting in August. So,
Yeah,
Caleb?
thank you, Mr. Chair, for
Yep.
the opportunity. So, you know, you all know my day job is a regulator and sitting on this as an alternate, you know, we have some regulatory oversight. So I follow it from two standpoints, one from that regulatory perspective, but also from a public health perspective. And how I feel that when we look at any kind of, we'll call it a sin, cigarettes, tobacco, alcohol, marijuana, whatever the case may be, you know, unless it's water and wheat bread, it's not good for you. So when we look at something like this, you know, the genie's essentially out of the bottle, and whether it comes to us through this referendum shortly, or, you know, there's another attempt in a year or 2 years or 3 years, it's going to happen. So I think where you're going with trying to build up some regulatory oversight of this now, I think is a good idea. And I think that if we were to put that in place, it will give the voters an idea of, okay, when this, and I'm going to use this as an example, when this passes, this is what it's going to look like in Southington. Or when this passes, this is how we decided to serve our residents best, because they could drive to another town, or they will drive to another town if we say no, or if the referendum goes the other way and the residents of this community say, no, we don't want it here. So they're going to go somewhere else. So I think that, you know, there's a lot of different directions I can kind of talk about, but I do agree with you, Mr. Chair, that moving forward and building something in our regulation for the people of Southington to look at and to think about and say, okay, well, I want to vote no because you know, the Planning and Zoning Commission came up with such loose regulations that's just too much. You know, we're going to sell it in front of a school. I think we're going to do that, but
Dear God.
I put that down.
yeah, he did.
Caleb wants it.
But you know, to the other point of this, I feel that we do need to put something in place, even if the residents say no, because, and I tried to get as much as I could, and there's a lot of complexity, there's a lot of pages to this thing, and I tried to read some of the summary briefs. And it did say that, you know, a town has the right to say that this is a specific area that you can use. This is a specific area that you can't use. I'm not a fan of walking through a park and smelling the roses and also smelling cannabis. That's me. But I don't want to say that one person has, you know, the right to say you can't do it anywhere. And so when one of our residents wants to use cannabis somewhere, which they're already using, that I want to say, well, listen, I want to be respectful of your rights to do that. However, please be respectful of my rights to enjoy the outdoor and fresh air. So I think that there's a place, and that's the beauty of regulation. That's how we can address the concerns, but it takes, as Peter and Sue, you know, experienced when you do the medical thing, there's a lot to it. And there's a lot of opposing viewpoints, but to that end, there's a lot of viewpoints that are on the same line that we can cross some bridges.
So if the General Assembly wanted to regulate this and say that we must do that, or use the term that they use, you shall do that, they have the prerogative to do that, and that would supersede any regulation that we have. They chose not to do that. What they chose to do, and whether it was part of a compromise or not, I don't know. I did work up there, so I can imagine, but that's just imagination, right? It's probably more dramatic than it actually was. But the reality is that they chose not to do that. What they chose to do was to push it down to the 169 towns in the state of Connecticut and say, hey, Planning and Zoning Commission in Town A, or in our case, in the town of Southington, you are responsible for setting these regulations. That's what they did. You know, where it ends up getting used or not, in some ways isn't our purview. That's something that would deal with in an ordinance, and that's really the town council's responsibility, not ours. But this stuff, to my point again, is that this stuff gets regulated all the time. We regulate vape cigarettes. We regulate the sale of tobacco to minors. I think Southington actually, a couple of years ago, if I remember correctly, we were a forefront of regulating the sale of minors, and we didn't allow it for anyone under the age of 21. And we were, you know, we were insightful. Like, we were good planners for doing that, right? But we did it. And we did it because we have the ability to do that under the general statutes. And again, I think, and, you know, I respect and I appreciate everyone's perspective on this. I think that, you know, as a planning and zoning commission and the rules and the powers that are afforded to us under the general statutes, we have an obligation to do this. And I'll just close by using a phrase from a movie, which you probably all will remember, and you know I like to do that, but with great power comes great responsibility. And it's time for us to exercise that responsibility and provide our staff with some direction so that we can take up this matter in due course. And in due course, I would hope that we would do this at our next meeting in August. As you all know, we have one meeting in August, just like we did in July. So if there's nothing else to add, if we could just get a show of hands.
I would.
Go ahead, Peter.
The only thing that I would say to that, Mr. Chair,
Yep.
is and Commissioner Salka made the point in regards to the other facility. I think we should have, or I don't know, we have the power to do it or recommend to the council, moratorium at least to the end of the year for any applications, so that that can't happen. While whatever decision the town makes, whether it's us, and I agree with you, draft language, great. But if there's a referendum in November, it gets undone or gets substantiated or whatever. So I think, to me, I would rather have something like that so that we don't get caught in a position of having to do something that we may or may not want to. And in addition to that, if we want to draft some things, because I think one of the advantages of drafting something is that we will have a public comment.
Yeah.
And absent of that, people really, if we didn't do that, people couldn't voice any opinion anywhere.
Right.
They could come to the council and bother them for 5 minutes. But they don't have any role in that. But we would have a public session here to have at least a public forum for people to voice that. So that's a positive thing about voicing things. But I don't know what people think about the moratorium. I think it would be responsible for us so we don't get caught in making a decision that we shouldn't have to do. In addition, we could draft some things and then have a discussion and then a public. I think that, to me, I would want that.
Let me just respond, and I just want to go back and say what I said at the beginning of this meeting tonight, and you bring up a good point, Peter, is that, you know, the purpose of this being on our agenda tonight was to have a hearty discussion amongst the commission members, amongst the people who are responsible for passing whatever we end up doing. It wasn't to engage in a public input session. It's just sort of to give staff a guidepost to sort of say, okay, this is where we're thinking about going, draft something up for us. And then we get, just in terms of process, we get that proposed regulation, and that regulation, we do open it up for public input. So any member of the public would be allowed to come in and sort of give us their thoughts on whatever that regulation is, whether they agree with it, don't agree with it, or feel like there's something else. You know, I'm not in favor of a moratorium. I mean, I think that, you know, we should take a stand, as I said, if we decide, you know, in December or in 2025 or whatever it might be, that whatever we do here this year is the wrong thing or was the wrong thing, or things have changed and we want to look at it a little bit differently. We always have the obligation or the opportunity to come back and look at stuff again, and we do that routinely. We really do. So just before anybody else, Dave has his hand up, so I want to give him a chance to.
Yeah,
give us
Mr.
his
Chairman, I was
thoughts.
just reading through the NVCOG Cannabis Act summary, and it does state that although May 2022 has been identified as the first date when retail marijuana businesses would be allowed to open, it's imperative that the NVCOG communities review their current regs. So that's the road that you're going down, but they did have a date in there of May 2022.
To open, I think.
Yeah, that's to open. Does that mean that tomorrow we can still receive an application and
That's
once,
my point.
and once we have the application, it's been filed? They can't open until 2022, but the application, the horse is already out of the barn.
That's my point.
And that's sort of, you know, whether it's be a moratorium or whether it's a regulation. My feeling is whatever we can do that's the fastest, because I've heard a lot of discussion about, well, you know, it's here. So my feeling is I'd rather be the light, the light on the top of the hill shining and saying, we're not going to have it here in Southington. I don't care what you're doing.
Maybe
And it
that's
may
the
come into
darkness.
town.
Yeah,
That's the darkness.
The bottom line, what's that?
Maybe that's the darkness.
yeah.
It could be, whatever way you want to phrase it.
Bob, I don't think, and I don't have the act in front of me, but I don't think, and it's certainly something for staff to sort of gain more clarity on, but I don't think that an applicant can come into town hall tomorrow and file an application to open up a recreational dispensary in town.
What's stopping them?
And I think further that our zoning regulations are permissive, and by virtue of the fact that we don't have something in there allowing it, that it would not be permitted.
Special permit.
So, anyways, again, I don't think that I think the act provided its own sort of window for towns to make a decision. And I want to say that that is either September or October of this year for us to make a decision, if we chose to do that. Or maybe it's November to give an opportunity for any moratorium action to occur, but anyways, I mean, it's something to be clear. I don't know if anyone else had something else to say, but.
Well, I have a little clarification here is, you know, few towns that surround us already put a moratorium because they didn't want to have this type of issue happening. It's been all over the papers. So I don't get it why we wouldn't do that.
Yeah, my thought is we don't know what's exactly in those 300 pages that could go
Right.
into effect right now and somebody could walk in tomorrow. I think it's I know you'd rather just implement something, but I'd rather be safer than get stuck with something we didn't want.
Well, let me just, and not that this is we're being held to this necessarily, but just a sense of who on the board supports a moratorium on allowing recreational sales of cannabis in the town of Southington. So we're universal. Caleb, you get a pass, I guess. I mean, you can raise your hand if you want to, but, well, so let's take it a step further now. Who on the commission supports a regulation that prohibits the sale of recreational marijuana in the town of Southington? Just show of hands. 5, we got 6. So then I guess, I mean, I guess, you know, for staff directional purposes, and I appreciate any input from members of the commission on this. Perhaps we have them draft a regulation, a proposed regulation for us that provides for, I'm trying to think, do we want it to be a moratorium and just to get the conversation started, or do we want it to be a prohibition? So
Well, do we have the authority to have a moratorium, or do we have the authority to do that? That's got to go to council? How would that go?
What I would advise you to do at this point is to have the chair put down a list of questions that you guys have for me to clarify for you, and I will get back with responses to you. Is that reasonable? There seems to be a lot of different things flying around. I want to make sure I give you correct information. So if the chair can provide me with some pointed questions, I can give you clarifications and a little insight on what other towns have been doing.
Okay, so if we can come back, Dave, and when do we meet in August? The 17th. If we come back on the 17th and Jeremy, in the interim, I'll act as sort of the keeper of the questions that come in, just in the event that there's the same question being asked by different people. I'll just keep the stuff in hand, and I'll funnel those through you to get clarity on that stuff. And we'll come back in August, I'm sorry, in September,
August, right?
August 17th, and have a further conversation on this and see where we're going to end up going. Is that fair?
I'm more than happy to do that for you.
Is that fair with everybody on the commission?
That's fine. Just one point of clarification. So for the moment, the fact that the medical regulation stipulates that that's the only type of sale currently legal here in town, you have nothing to worry about until this sorts itself out.
I think that an argument could be made either way. So I think that in order to sort of clarify that, I think that we're interested in clarifying that.
Yeah, 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 who could do a moratorium? When can people come in? I guess, so like, we're holding our breath between now and the 17th to prevent a situation that you described, Commissioner Salka, on the other one. And so if indeed I guess the only thing that I would say, Mr. Chair, and I agree with giving the town attorney questions. The only thing that I would say, though, if we could get some clarity on the moratorium question, and if it's something we could do, or we just ask the council, or whatever it is, if that's something that can be acted upon or sooner, I guess that's just a point, because I want to avoid a situation that we don't want.
Why don't we
To
just
your point.
do the moratorium, and then if it's not legal, then they'll say you couldn't do it in the
Can't
first
we-
place.
Right.
So why
Yeah,
can't we just vote on it?
yeah. Can we?
Do we have to do that? Is that not a good
I,
idea?
I would advise you against that at
All
this
right.
point.
I was just
Let's
wondering.
make sure we have our ducks in a row.
He's with you, Jeff. All right. Darn lawyers.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I would say, in final thought, that, I do think it is positive to, while I understand what you're saying, and certainly, I mean, no disrespect, I do think that if food trucks warrant some extra time to think about, certainly marijuana does as well. And I mean that in a respectful way, because I think it is an important decision. My child goes to school here, many of our children, grandchildren. It is something we should consider. But we also, all the things that, like you said, for any other application, how does it fit in 50 years? What does it look like? Where does it go? These things are important, and we should take more time to see everything. So thank you to my fellow commissioners for your points.
Yeah, so the first question, Jeremy, is, are we allowed to have a moratorium, and what are the parameters around that?
Yeah, number one.
And also, are people allowed to come in and put a zoning application in front of us tomorrow or tonight and fall in as a grandfather under the state statute?
All right.
Okay?
I will look
Did
into that
did
for
I-
you.
Did I capture that well enough, everyone?
Agreed.
Fine.
Okay,
Good job.
okay, thanks. Are we all set with that? Anyone else have anything else you want to
Can
add?
we just throw in this
Commissioner-
question too? Is that if the will of the people is to have it, how then do we respond from this commission? Like, so if they say yes,
Who says yes?
the people,
It goes to referendum.
During
they
the
vote.
referendum.
Yeah, right.
and the
Yep.
people say yes, then, we can we say no? I guess is my question.
No.
We have to
Ref-
say yes.
Referendum.
It-
You
it-
answered
I
Right.
that.
think it
You won't be
clearly
able to
says
say, no, you can
intention.
regulate it
Right.
according to, your other,
Mhm.
whatever regulations you deem fit.
So, sorry, question? So then it would be like a special permit application, right? And it would go like on a case-by-case basis, is that
It-
correct?
Doesn't have to be.
Okay.
If we do, the way it was explained, if we do nothing.
Yeah.
Then we treat it as any other special permit. However, we can say like you, special regulation, special permit, where you do have the, segregation and stuff like that. That's why I brought up the medical marijuana thing, where it's a special permit, but you have special regulations
Right.
that determine other things like that, which I think would probably, in my view, the more appropriate way to go for it, versus it could go anywhere.
Correct, yeah. I would be more of the mind to want to review, like, similar to how we handle it,
Yeah, right.
That's where I would lean.
So what we're really talking here is we're saying, the immediate thing would be the moratorium, and secondary to that would be a full-fledged regulation
Correct.
that we may have to modify, but at least, so with the moratorium first, then the regulation, and then if we have to modify it after the regulation, after the referendum,
Right.
I think that's the right way to go.
Yes.
I would agree.
Personally.
I agree.
Okay. Are we all set? We all set? Okay, we just have a couple more small things on here. Item number 11, items to be scheduled for a public hearing. Dave, you want to talk about any of these?
Pretty straightforward. The first one is a special permit, just because it's going for the open space preservation angle of it. It's typical. That's what you look for. You do have extra open space under this application. The other two, again, straightforward, excess garage spaces. And there is one zone change that you may have alluded to.
And that's an open space preservation, not an arch zone, right?
Correct.
So two different things.
Yeah.
Okay, I got phone up on that one.
So, so just so everybody can sort of prepare themselves, I have it on pretty good authority that this commission will not be inactive for the coming months. We have a pretty full group of applications that are sitting in the wings here. So,
Get the AC working. that's all.
just,
I'm
well,
with you on
I
that.
mean, it will work in December, but, anyways, I just want to make everyone aware of that because I, like everybody else, would like to have a little bit of a break on some of our meeting agendas that have gone a little bit long. And, I mean, we deal with these things as quickly as we can, but I'm happy that everybody, does so respectfully of everybody else's position. And, I think that at the end of the day, we do a great job of representing our constituents. So, with that, if there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Motion from Commissioner Salkin. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second, Commissioner Volpe. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
I get a full class, so.
I think we have some questions.